Hello there, friends. Nice to see you once again. This is Spencer Michaud, and today we're going to be talking about the new moon in the third decan of Taurus. We're going to talk a little bit about Jupiter ingressing into Taurus and its square with Pluto and the opposition with Mars, the big fixed T-square. I hope that you've been having a good eclipse season. We're kind of starting to come out of the big eclipse changes. I took a week off to do some gardening and get the ball rolling with the wildflower pollinator habitat that I'm putting in my backyard, and that's been going pretty well. The seeds are in, they've been watered, and they're starting to sprout a little bit, so it's pretty exciting. Yeah, we'll go on a little journey today. We'll take the new moon through the houses. We'll take a look at where Jupiter might be moving through in your particular natal chart based on your rising sign. And as usual, we will do an I-Ching for the new moon. We'll look at an animal. And yeah, we'll just have a good time together. I've been challenging folks in the chat today to tell me where you're stopping in from and tell me a song that's been helping you get through the week. I've been starting a new kind of feature, I guess I would call it, in my newsletter, which I call Music of the Spheres, or the Song of the Week. And it sort of reflects either a song I'm into or something that reflects the astrology of the time. For the eclipse, the last eclipse, I shared Bonnie Raitt's I Can't Make You Love Me, which reflected the first decan of Scorpio and like the grief of letting go and things of that nature. And this week I had a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek song that I put in there so that I could make a funny joke in my promotional material. But it does reflect Venus moving into the first decan of Cancer and the Two of Cups, which is it was run to you by Whitney Houston. I really love Whitney Houston, actually. So it reflected the energy of the Two of Cups quite well. The thrill of romantic attraction, creating a harmonious, mutually beneficial relationship. But if you aren't familiar with the reference, there's a video that came out shortly after the 1992 film The Bodyguard with Kevin Costner and Whitney Houston. And it was actually in the movie as well, the video where, Whitney Houston has like the wind blowing in her hair and she's running through the sky with the clouds going over top of her. And I found a GIF or a GIF or however the hell you say it, of a cow with the wig with the hair blowing in the air, and I thought it was just perfect. And I'm pretty excited about that. It's just how silly and ridiculous it was. So tell me your songs that have been getting you through the week. My backup song for this week was going to be a song called If by Bread. I don't know if you're familiar with that song. It's such a gorgeous song that I think speaks to the gentleness of Venus in the second decan of Cancer, what we've been experiencing this week. So go check that out if you haven't. Really, really beautiful, beautiful tune. And yeah, I'm looking through the chat here and just welcoming some friends here. It's starting to get active here. Laura is here from Vancouver, Washington. Hello, Laura. Jody is here from sunny South Florida. Says Deacon Blues from Steely Dan. Yeah, all right. Love me some Steely Dan. I listen to them in the mornings sometimes. They're a great band. Watershrine Muse is here from the Oregon coast. Nice to see you, friends. Stephen the Jupiterian's joining us, I believe, from San Francisco. Monique, my friend Monique, hello. Monique's been getting through the week with a little bit of vanilla ice. Monique and I have some inside jokes, but nice to see you, Monique. Monique just took her daughter to Disneyland, and it was just adorable seeing some of her pictures from Disneyland for selling the most Girl Scout cookies. So congratulations to Monique's daughter for selling 1,200 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. That's incredible. That's an incredible achievement, and you all are awesome. So welcome, Monique. Robert is here. You made it, Robert. I think from Kalamazoo. Nice to see you, friend. Remco is joining us from the Netherlands. Hello, Remco. Nanda Devi is joining us. Hello, Nanda Devi. Tanya Gerardo is here from Mesa, Arizona. Hello, Tanya. Monique is here from Los Angeles, right? Says, my song of the week is Emotional Sickness by Queens of the Stone Age. I have that on repeat. Oh, they just released a new album, didn't they? That's pretty fun. Okay, very cool. Dimfy says, hi from Holland. Over here, plants, veggies, and flowers sprouting as well. Green zucchini, yellow zucchini, etc. Nice, nice. Yes. Wow, you already got vegetables coming together. That's awesome. We're still in like the point in spring in the Midwest of the United States where it could still freeze. So I think we're waiting in maybe another week or so until we get those vegetables in the ground. Bibby is here. Hello, Bibby. Making greetings from the Netherlands. My song is Suzanne by Aretha Franklin. All right. Yes, Cohen's version. Very cool. That's a good choice. Okay. Yeah. Great songwriter, Leonard Cohen. I haven't heard that cover by Aretha Franklin, but that's awesome. I'll have to check that out. I've heard the original from Leonard Cohen, but that is a good tune. Steven says, every morning a different TV theme song pops into my head like Gilligan's Island. That happens to me sometimes. I'll remember some random thing from my 80s childhood that will get stuck in my head. The last one was the Gummy Bears theme. You remember, anybody familiar with that Saturday morning cartoon? Gummy bears bouncing here and there and everywhere. Do 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 do. We are the Gummy Bears, and then the like, we are the Gummy Bears. Okay, sorry, I'm just giving you some TV tunes. Watershine Muse says, I love that song by Brad, haven't heard in years. Oh, it's such a great tune. And that to me was the first thing that popped into my mind for Venus in the first decan of Cancer, which is Venus in her own face, the ability to just feel the pull of attraction and want to take care of someone else, and just the innocence of that new love. Just a gorgeous tune. I first was introduced to that tune actually by a classical piano cover when I was just listening some study music, not that long ago actually, and then I listened to the original. I had that on repeat along with Everything I Own, which is another tune by them, and just these beautiful songs about caring about one another. Just the simplicity of that. Nanda Devi says, this week's been full of handpan tunes. What is the handpan? Is that like the pan flute? Maybe I don't know what the handpan is, but tell me more, Nanda Devi. Watershine Muse says, Red Hot Chili Peppers are getting me through my morning workouts. Nice. My partner likes to joke and talk a little mess about the Red Hot Chili Peppers, who I like, by the way, and they're like, I love that song by the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and I'm like, oh, which one? I was like, they're all the same song, I just love it. which is sort of true a little bit. I mean, I know that there's some variation, but they definitely have some consistency in the quality of their work. Yes, Monique, Vanilla Ice. Someday I'll get some lines shaved in the side of my head. See if I'll rock that Vanilla Ice 90s style. Maybe if we get to 10,000 subscribers on the channel, I'll shave some lines in my head. That'll be the goal. All right, so I think we're at like almost 3,000, so we're a little far away. No, not even close. Maybe a little over 2,000. Monique says her official is talking about her daughter and the Girl Scout cookies. Her official numbers was 1,596 boxes sold, and you made her day with the shout out, Spencer. Oh, nice. Well, I can't remember your daughter's name off the top of my head, but she had a really adorable little video on Instagram where she was like, come and buy some cookies. And she like this little sing-songy voice. It was awesome. Dimpy says, nice that you choose a cow one day this week. I felt like an old cow. Oh no, Dimpy. The next day watching the big show with a Welsh BGT show with a Welsh choir. I wanted to be one of the cows in the rehearsal shed. Next thing I see is your cow with the waving hair. Oh, that's funny, Dimpy. Well, we're all becoming old cows together, aren't we, on this channel? Cheers to you and to the graceful beauty of aging. All right. A's Creations is here. Hello, A. Nice to see you. Let's see. My goodness, so many good songs here. Old Tyrannosaurus Rex, Chariots of Silk, and Salamander Palaganda, Robert says. Oh, those are good choices. Okay. Bibby says, outtakes by Aretha. Oh, yes. Okay. So we're just keep the music coming. This is going to be our music snacks, pop culture, astrology hour. Angela is here. Greetings from Nebraska. Your cow thumbnail graphic for this episode is fantastic. Well, thank you. I felt it was truly inspired. I'm glad that I hope some people get the reference because I just had a really nice laugh. And the moment of realization when that all starts to come together, the vision feels really good. You're like, oh, I hope people will get a chuckle out of this. So I'm glad that you did. Okay. Handpan drum, says Nanda Devi. Dome-shaped metal instrument you tap with the finger. Oh, okay. And hand, very good for meditation and chilling out. Yes, I've seen that. So they're pre-tuned drums with metal. Yeah, that is very relaxing. They're expensive. I've looked into that. They had some of those at the United Astrology Conference in 2018. They're like a couple $1,000. So I played them for a while. It was fun. So that's neat. And Jody says, there's no grace or beauty in aging, LOL. Yes, there is, Jody. I mean, look, you're a shining example of that. So be kind to yourself. All right. Okay, friends, let's start talking some astrology. These are great meditations in the beginning. I'm so glad that you're here with me and that you are joining me. Let's buckle in for a few hours today. We'll go on a journey. We'll break down this astrology. I'll give you a sneak peek of my Decans of Taurus webinar. We'll talk about Taurus III today. The Decans of Taurus webinar is on sale for 20% off until the 21st of May. So this is the last week or so that you can get that for 20% off. That's a great way to support the channel. If you want to learn more about what I talk about here on the channel, I give you sneak previews. I give some of it away for free. But if you want to support the work that I do buying the webinar or donating through the chat here with the little dollar sign on the chat, it's called Super Sticker or Super Chat, or buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com is another way to support the work that I do. Or you can send me a check in the mail. Like I received a check in the mail from a supporter this week. They're like, I don't deal with PayPal. Here's some money. Like, you're great. And with a beautiful note. And so I just want to give you a shout out, say thank you to someone who sent me something in the mail, which is very nice. It's nice to have that type of a handwritten experience. So thanks again. Thank you, Michelle, for your super sticker. Appreciate you. Says, thanks for doing these lives, Spencer. Appreciate you, Michelle. Hope that you're doing well, Cap Rising friend. I think I'm figuring out everybody's chart that shows up in the chat here, starting to remember that. And Illis J, our resident fashion advisor, says moo. So welcome, Illis J. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here. So we're in the middle of Taurus season. We have entered into the solar period of time where we are in the third decan of Taurus, the last 10 degrees of Taurus. So let's start by understanding what is going to be required of us. I like the sun as a spotlight as far as shining our attention and focusing our attention on a collective set of circumstances. This is why the sun moving through different decans is a great way to understand what people's mindset might be, what the canvas of our lives, our shared canvas, might be pointing towards. So in this case, we have the third decan of Taurus, and this is a decan that's syncretized with the Seven of Pentacles, where you see a figure that is leaning on his garden hoe, contemplating some blight that has come into the picture on his potatoes. This is an image of the potato famines from the 1840s that Pixie from the Rider-Waite Tarot, Pamela Coleman Smith, put into this decan as far as like trying to help us understand when forces of nature, things that are somewhat beyond our control, can threaten the healthy growth that we're trying to promote. You know, we've gone through a journey in Taurus season where we had the Five of Pentacles, where it showed two figures that are walking through the snow outside of a church with an injury or like falling on hard times. This is the Mercury decan, where this is a scene of what might be happening if we don't plan for our future. So this card encourages us to plow the fields of our life, plan for the future, take stock of our resources, and get things ready to move. And I want you to keep that in mind as we talk further today, because Jupiter is going to be moving into that first decan of Taurus. And Jupiter is a planet that expands things. It's a planet that shows us what actions we can take to bring honor and merit into our experience. I think that Jupiter being of the solar sect, it brings us good fortune by taking action. Whereas Venus being of the lunar sect is where can we receive good fortune? Just by being open and saying, okay, I'm ready to be open to what is going to come to me through fate, all right, through 2K. Whereas this is a planet of the daimon, something where we might be inspired to take an action. So this is going to be a really important week in lunar cycle to figure out how to perpetuate your abundance, how to make material plans, how to take into account that there are going to be some forces that are beyond your control, and how do you mitigate the challenges that come up? How do you plan for them? Also, the other part about this is Jupiter is going to be moving into a square with Pluto in Aquarius right as it ingresses into Taurus. And then less than a week after that, opposition to Mars that's moved into Leo. So there's probably going to be some compromises that we're going to have to make in our plans, in the way that we are dealing with our collective resources. And some of it may just be completely out of our control, which is life. You know, sometimes things happen, nature happens. You know, you've seen this, you've witnessed this on this channel. I was without power or electricity for 6.5 days because of an ice storm. It wasn't something that I, had any control over, although I learned from that mistake, and we've been putting plans into place to make sure that if something like that happens again, we have a backup power source like a generator. So this is some of the vibe of Taurus III, is what insurance policies can you have in place? And I mean that literally and figuratively, so that if there are things that come up that are out of your control, that you may be able to make adjustments and be flexible. And we'll talk about some of the metaphysical, mythological roots of that energy, but that's sort of the practical part of the energy that we're going to be experiencing with this new moon. So I'm going to look through the chat one more time here, and then I will show you the Decans preview. Tarya is here. Hello, Tarya. Love Mark Bolan. Yes, Mark Bolan. I'm bang a gong, friends. He was a great guitar player and singer. And thank you, Remco, for sharing the link to my Decan offerings. You can find that at spencermichaud.com at the store. And also the Stars and Cards webinar that I recently did for Nightlight Astrology in February, so you can check that out too. Susanna is here from Finland. Hello, Susanna. My goodness, Susanna, you always post the most amazing pictures. I want to give you a shout out, Susanna, because I saw the cat enclosure that you have that's outdoors for your beautiful cats. It's this beautiful cat condo. It's huge, and it has all these climbing things, and I wish I could build something like that for my cats outside. So I'm envious of your space right there by the lake and everything. It's so gorgeous. So it looks like a beautiful sanctuary. Dawn Fisher is here. Hello, Dawn. Nice to see you. Jody says, I started getting into tarot. Spencer, have you thought about teaching tarot? Yeah, I mean, I already am on some level with the Decans, but I have the Stars and Cards webinar, which talks about the kind of the combination of tarot and astrology. I had the Decans webinars. I do have a new book that I really recommend. This is The Living Tarot by T. Susan Chang. This is my favorite tarot teacher. She is just an incredible, intelligent fountain of knowledge. And this is a new book that she just put out that is workbook style. And if I would recommend getting this book and all the other books that T. Susan Chang has ever published in her life. But maybe I'll do something with tarot. I have to figure out how I would add my spin to the conversation, and how to fuse all the sources together. That might be coming in the future, but we'll see. But if you want a great place to start, and maybe even if I were to teach something, I would even ask her if I'd been can I use this as a workbook? Because I would start with this. It's a great place to start. But that's a great question, Jody. I've got some other things cooking. I've got some other teaching things that are brewing in my the recesses of my mind. A big focus I've been having this spring, though, has really been my garden, to be honest with you. So that's taken up a lot of my mental and physical energy lately. But I'm happy to be here with you today. BB says, I've got Mercury at 29 degrees Taurus, my moon at 14 Taurus. Missed your eclipse episode. As a Leo rising, I've got smacked by all the themes of the fourth last week. Got my Uranus at 13 Scorpio. Oh, BB. Well, here is a good opportunity with this new moon that's going to be happening on Friday, May the 19th. So this is a week from today. So I try to get my new and full moon and astrology of the month out a week earlier, so that you have time to kind of prepare for the energy that's coming. So this may be time to prepare to take stock and say what has worked, what didn't, what types of things are we having to redo. We're still going through Mercury retrograde right now until Sunday, when it turns direct at 5 degrees of Taurus. So it's a reevaluation process. It's atoning maybe for some mistakes that we made through our rashness or through our not really working through the entire process. I can attest to this as a gardener. I was really excited about doing my garden, and I dug up all the grass as best I could. I took my garden hoe and I got rid of as much grass as I could, got everything prepared, planted my seed, watered it, and then realized about a couple days after that I didn't get all the grass. I didn't get all the weeds, and there's still some parts of it that I probably need to go in and pull out. So this is part of the energy of this new moon, is weeding the garden, assessing whether your process had worked well or not. This is another crazy part of my gardening journey is I started doing the garden and then went to the library and got like a stack of books on how to do a pollinator garden. I just did it in the opposite order. I should have gotten the books first and read up on that a little bit more, but it's all part of the process and it's all a learning experience. And I think that this is part of this lunation cycle that we're coming up on, is that there are going to be times where you're going to have to redo some stuff. There's going to be some pests in the garden that you have to get rid of. There's maybe even some embarrassing things that you may have done recently that you regret and that you have to atone for and turn around and make it better. So those are things to think about as we talk about the astrology today. Okay, Jody, yes, she is a supporter of T. Susan Chang's work already. Good. Well, again, if there's enough interest, I always like creating curriculum. So that is another thing you can do to help me in this chat is let me know what kind of things you'd like to see from me as a webinar, as a class, even as videos. I always am open to what you as a community would like to see and would like to learn more of, because I have a ever expanding library here of a myriad of topics, and all I really need is some impetus to really dive into it. And I am motivated by being of service. So if there is a demand or a desire for something, that really gets me fired up, because I really love being helpful. Okay, EK, Beth is here. Hello, Beth. Says, I love T. Susan Chang. She put out a 600-page book. She also offers the course on her Etsy page. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I don't want to step on Susie's toes. She has her own courses that are amazing. So she's a great resource for just learning tarot right away. And I want to make sure that we're amplifying her signal and shining a light on her work too. So she's a great resource for tarot. But again, we can integrate these things in our divination practice. That's part of what I like to do on this channel is once you learn some things from Susie, you can come here and learn some things from me, and we can combine tarot and astrology. And I think that would be a great exercise. Rachel Fletcher is here from Roanoke, Virginia. Hello, Rachel. Nice to see you. Dawn says that week prep is wonderful too. So appreciative. Oh, thank you, Dawn. I appreciate you. Yeah, Beth says there's always more grass, right? It's hard to get rid of it, isn't it? You think you've got rid of all of it, and then there's roots and just more of the stupid grass keeps popping up. Michelle says, I was poo-pooing Mercury retrograde and how I didn't like how much focus was put on it, and oh my God, had tons of technical glitches. Mercury is saying that. That'll teach you. Yeah, I mean, not every transit affects us exactly the same. I think that there are certain years where something like a Mercury retrograde may be felt more personally, especially if Mercury is your time lord. That's part of the beauty, I think, of Hellenistic astrology, is seeing when things are turned on and turned off in your chart, because not all of those transits are going to be weighted equally. Another technique that I actually am really getting into and using a lot with clients and maybe wanting to do a webinar on is primary directions. That's a really powerful technique where you move the chart 4 minutes of clock time for every year of the life and see when planets come to one of the angles, the ascendant, midheaven, descendant, and lower midheaven. Really powerful technique to seeing when planets will ripen, when the natal promise of that planet will come to fruition. So that's something to play with, and maybe we can do that as a group too. Lisa is here, says, would love to hear more about fixed stars. Happy to discover you a few months ago. Oh, thank you, Lisa. I love fixed stars, and you definitely would be interested in teaching more fixed star stuff. If you haven't found the webinar I taught, I believe for Astrology Victoria a few years ago now, I have an introduction to fixed stars on YouTube. That's a free talk that's 2.5 hours. So check that out if you haven't already, Lisa. Angela is asking for a yearly Deccan walk group. I'm doing this for the first time with 6 other soul sisters, and it's already been so enriching. That's a great idea, Angela. That would be a lot of fun. So I'm going to add that to the list, because I think that would be a great thing to do as a group together. Dawn is the fighting the blackberry vines, the bane of my garden. I have been trying to get rid of Virginia creeper in my backyard, which is very difficult to get rid of, very much like a blackberry vine. So I hear you. I think what you're referring to is those blackberries that are like those huge fruits. I remember seeing this at a farm that we almost bought. That there was a 5-acre farm a few years ago that we were in the process of purchasing, which that was a 12th house story, but it ended up being there was a Superfund, a toxic Superfund site where there was toxic waste about a half a mile up the road, and it was seeping into the well of that property, and we had to pull out of the deal. But on that property, there were blackberry vines like all along the whole property, and it just took over the whole place. So I can imagine that they are spreaders. Lisa also says Time Lords would be cool. Yeah, I think we could do some Time Lord stuff. Okay. All right. Okay, friends. Great comments, great suggestions. Love the community groupthink here. This is one of the things I really love about doing these live streams, is being able to connect with all of you and hear your ideas and your suggestions and just your experiences. So what I'd like to do now is pull up the decans of Taurus and just kind of go a little bit deeper into the Taurus decan number 3. Hopefully you can all see that. So here you can see a decan flashcard, digital decan flashcard that you actually get a download of when you purchase the webinar for each of the 3 decans of Taurus. And we've talked a little bit about the card, about the potato famine. We've talked about pests or weeds that might threaten the seeds that we've planted, and making amends for the challenges that we might be experiencing. There is a spirit or a daimon with this decan called the Litai, and this is a shout out for Dimphy here today. She was talking about we're becoming old cows. Well, the Dimphy, maybe what we're becoming is like the Litai, who are these hobbled old women that followed behind another demon or daimon, I guess you could say, named 8, which translated to ruin. And these hobbled old women would follow behind 8 as she descended from the heavens to step on the heads of men, and cause all this challenging experiences. Like, think about that. Like, you could say that, oh, a tornado comes, like, oh, that's 8 stepping on our heads, or, oh, the weeds are threatening our garden so that we're not going to get as bountiful a harvest. That's 8. And 8 also can translate to rashness. Sometimes we do things a little bit quicker because we don't know any better. That's another thing too. When we're doing something for the first time, often we make mistakes because we don't have the experience of doing it in the past. And that's totally okay. Like, there are certain things that you will never be able to figure out until you actually do it. I'm witnessing this with my favorite sports team, the Green Bay Packers. You've heard me talk about sports on this channel, and I really enjoyed all of your sharing of your favorite sports teams recently. And if you haven't checked this out, go on sports Twitter and check out the schedule release videos for both the Tennessee Titans and the Los Angeles Chargers. They are art. Like, they're great. And those promotional teams need a raise, but just trust me and check it out. But the team that I follow, the Green Bay Packers, are moving on from a legend, and their young quarterback, Jordan Love, is going to be starting for the first time. And even though he has been an apprentice for 3 years behind a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, he's going to be the starter for the first time. And he's going to probably be experiencing some of the mistakes that you can only learn by actually playing. Okay, so, and if we take that metaphor and we apply it to our own lives, maybe there's something that you've begun with Jupiter and Aries, a important new beginning. But there is only something that you're going to be able to learn by doing it, right? By actually getting under center, taking the snap, and feeling the pass rush of a 270-pound outside linebacker bearing down on you, and trying to figure out whether you're going to hit your first, second, or third read or receiver. And you're going to take a few hits. You're going to get sacked every once in a while. You're going to have some minor bumps and bruises and injuries, but you're going to learn from that. And that's why experience is so important in sports and in life. Okay, I love sports as a metaphor for life. I see sports as a ballet. I see it as a test of human capabilities. And I learned so much about perseverance from playing sports and watching it. So that's why I bring that into the conversation here today. And that brings me to another sports figure that I think is really important. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who is a really great player for the Milwaukee Bucks, my favorite basketball team. They recently were eliminated in the playoffs, and they had been the best team in the regular season. Like, they were just cruising through the regular season. They were the #1 seed. They had a home field advantage, home court advantage, and they got their ass handed to them by the Miami Heat in the first round of the playoffs. And it was a huge disappointment for them and for the community, kind of a surprise, a shock. And Giannis was asked after the season, if he was disappointed that he didn't win a championship, or that does he consider the season a failure? And he had a really amazing answer. He always has these really Jupiterian, he's a Sagittarius, and he has these really well thought out philosophical answers to some of these questions sometimes. First of all, he was very annoyed that the question was even asked, number one, because in his mind, he was like, no, it's not a failure. This is part of the journey. Like, every year, there are 31 teams that don't win a championship. And this is a part of a process to maybe getting to that goal. You learn something from it. So he did not consider that a failure. Just how with the goals that you're setting for yourself during this period of time, you may have to experience what from the outside, some people may call that a failure, but it's part of the learning experience. It's part of the journey to eventual success if you pay attention and learn from your mistakes. Learn from your mistakes. That's the important part. The real, I guess, failing would be if you do something, it doesn't work, and then you keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. To me, that's the real failure, is the inability to adapt. One of an important challenge for people or anybody that has Taurus placements, or for the Taurus area of your chart, everyone has a Taurus area of their chart, may be the challenge of learning some flexibility, of learning how to make adjustments when it is necessary. Taurus placements like comfort, and they like routine. They like things to be predictable. And oftentimes life is unpredictable, and that can really throw people out of their sense of inner calm and centeredness, myself included. I have a lot of challenges sometimes adjusting to things that I haven't planned for. This is part of the reason I became an astrologer, because I grew up in a very unpredictable household where there were just people coming and going. You didn't know if someone was going to be upset or happy one day to the next. You didn't even know if someone was going to be around one day to the next, right? I grew up with, my mom was married 3 times and my dad was married, or 4. My mom was married 4 times and my dad was married 3. And there's just times where adults were coming and going, and you have to learn to adjust to circumstances, and that can lead to that type of experience, formative experience, can lead to saying, I just want to know what is going to happen tomorrow. And astrology is a great teacher and tool for that if you use it within reason. If you try to control your experience through astrology, you will still lead to the same failures. It is a finger pointing towards the moon. It is not the moon itself. Sometimes you have to go through the experience to actually understand what it is going to be like, rather than just taking the astrological themes and saying, oh, this is going to be terrible. Because that's one of the things that is a challenge about doing divination, is tightening everything up, tensing up for a negative, what we might perceive to be a negative experience. And what I found with astrology is sometimes it is very difficult. And the negative, challenging transits that we talk about, they do bring some pain and they do bring some challenge. But often there are less intense manifestations, okay? Less extreme manifestations. Doesn't mean we don't feel it. It just means that sometimes it's not the end of the world with every single eclipse, with every single square, with every single Pluto transit, or whatever it is, Mars, but if we know the nature of the challenge, it can help us to be more prepared. And I think that alone, that pronoia is the word that means foresight, can help us make a better choice in the moment when we are dealing with circumstances that may be greater than us. That is the essence of humility versus hubris. It is very much hubristic to think that we know exactly what is going to happen and that we can control what is going to happen through astrology, okay? But it is the essence of humility, which is a word that they use for the hexagram number 2, which is all the open lines, okay, in the I-Ching. Humility is being open and being receptive, which is a Taurus quality, to be able to then make adjustments and react in the moment to what the moment requires. And I think that's part of Taurus 3 too, is having the humility to say, you know what? Maybe I couldn't have predicted exactly how this was going to turn out. Maybe I made some mistakes through rushing through it. Maybe there were some things that were out of my control, but now I have the opportunity to utilize my agency to change my behavior, my methods, to eliminate some challenges potentially, or eliminate some bad habits, eliminate a method that just wasn't working, to eliminate a pest. Sometimes this decan is very good for getting rid of people that bother you. Like if you do astrological magic, and Austin Coppock has a really fancy word for this in his book 36 Secrets. He calls it apotropic. Apotropaic, I believe that's how you pronounce it. Apotropaic. Apotropaic magic, which is protective magic. There's some really interesting and challenging fixed stars in this decan. Capulus, which is the sword of Perseus. So there's the rashness part, the sword that is just very young. Algol, the blinking eye of Medusa, which is, the Chinese called it piled up corpses. So there's some difficulty with that, but both of those stars can be utilized for protection energy, to drive away things that may be bothering you on some level. So maybe you can, even if you don't practice astrological magic, you can think about, how am I going to eliminate the pests in my life? How am I going to reevaluate my own role in creating challenges as well? Okay, so themes: floods, droughts, pestilence, natural disasters, humility before nature, Okay. It is the ultimate hubris to think that we can control nature, that you learn that as a gardener is you can do everything right. And then you'll get a cold snap or you'll get a frost. The weather report didn't predict it. You'll get a tornado, you'll get a flood, you'll get something. Doesn't matter how well you did it. There's still forces, there's still wild cards. And that's Taurus 3 in a nutshell. Assessing efforts and remediating mistakes. Again, those liti followed behind 8, offering up repentant prayers. That's why Austin Coppock calls that decan a string of prayer beads. T. Susan Chang, who we've discussed in her book 36 Secrets, calls it fail better. Like learn from your mistakes. So the Sephira, the energetic kind of center on the Kabbalistic tree of life, is Netzach and Atzia, which is basically about enduring material hardship. What I didn't mention is this is a Saturn-ruled decan. Okay, so we've gone from Mercury to Moon to Saturn in the 3 decans of Taurus. Planning, manifestation and balance, and then ending, results, dealing with things that threaten the crops, what are the results of our actions? So this is a very results-orientated decan as well. Atonement and surrender to a higher power. So this is another thing that is very important for people with this decan, is oftentimes they will start off their life just kind of having a difficult time. Whether it's a trauma response or whether it's a hubristic response, oftentimes they will either have challenges with their own, creating a lot of their own misery, really. But then also they find that they need to surrender in some way, okay? Like there's a lot of controlling energy in Taurus 3, where because you may have felt unsafe as a young person, the defense mechanism that you learned was to try to control everything materially around you. And you eventually learn that that does not work. And being able to surrender to some of the changes around you while keeping your center is part of what a lot of Taurus 3 natives will learn, whether it's your rising sign, your sun, your moon, etc. Okay. So faith in the process. This is another part of gardening. I'll tell you, one of the things that I had some challenges around, and this is a common gardening mistake. I planted the seeds in my garden, and then I kind of panicked as I watched all the birds and the squirrels run through it. Like I thought they were eating the seeds, and I was wondering if I had planted enough seeds. So I bought another package of the wildflower seeds and spread even more. And now what I'm seeing is that I've very much overplanted the space and might have to go back and thin it out a little bit so that each one of those little plants is able to grow to its full size and full fruition. This is a very common beginner gardener mistake, and I should have known this because I've done vegetable gardening in the past. But you have to. Faith is believing in something you can't see. Faith in a seed, right? Isn't that a book by oh geez, what is it? I've got it on my Thoreau, isn't it? I think it's Henry David Thoreau. Faith in a seed is you can't see the manifestation right in front of your face, but you have to believe what it is going to turn into. And you have to nurture that belief. You have to maintain that belief. This is part of the endurance quality in Taurus 3, is maintaining faith that if you do what is necessary, if you remediate, that it will turn things around, rather than giving up altogether, right? A lot of times if something's not working, we just want to give up and say, fuck that, I'm just going to go off and do something else. But this is the one of the real benefits of having Taurus placements is you can endure anything. My poor father, my Piscean sun, Scorpio moon father had a Taurus rising, or has a Taurus rising, he's still around. And that guy, I'll tell you, he could endure all sorts of crap from people in his life, from people in his workplace, from me, his little Leo rising, demanding 12th house sun, only child, who had a lot of emotional energy and issues growing up as a child of divorce. He could put up with so much. And sometimes I'd just be like, why are you doing this? Why don't you get upset? He just never got upset. He would get upset like every once in a while. He would have like a volcanic meltdown, which is also a Taurus challenge. I would encourage you to try to regulate that response, especially in Taurus 3, because like with Algol in this decan, it's very easy to go nuclear with your anger. I have another Taurus friend who, man, he's so chill, but there was a circumstance where his wife was not being super faithful, and we ran into his wife and her new boyfriend or whatever at a bar, and I've never seen the guy so mad in my entire life. He was ready to murder the guy. I had to like talk him down. So when a Taurus feels like it's losing something that they feel belongs to them, their anger can be very violent. So I want you to think about that. Are you holding on too tightly to something that you feel is your own? Are you being too territorial? I struggle with this myself. I can be very territorial about my home and my space. I'm kind of going through this with some of my neighbors right now. I would really love to have a sacred space where I can just be by myself and water my garden. And my living circumstance just isn't set up like that right now. There's just a lot of people around. We live in a home that we share with another family, and it is challenging sometimes. And I'm having to re-examine both my desires and my role in how we can create a harmonious relationship with one another where everybody can get what they want. And that might be something to think about if you're a Taurus 3 type of person. Is it's important to compromise, and especially as we're moving into Taurus Jupiter season, when it's squaring Pluto and squaring Mars, the T-square, it's going to be very easy to dig your heels in a very territorial stance once those planets shift into their new signs. And it could lead to a stalemate where nobody wins. Okay, a standoff, right? Think of a bull as 1,000-pound animal digging its heels in. If it doesn't want to be moved, it's not going to be moved. Okay, and oftentimes we can lure the bulls in our life or ourselves through kindness, through gentleness, through food, through scritches. So what I'm recommending is try to utilize your skills of compromise, your Venusian ability to create harmony with the people in your life so that you don't get stuck in a position where you have a standoff. Okay. So I'm looking through the chat. Oh, some good chats here. I think I'm preaching to the choir. I know Monique was talking about, my ascendant. This is so on point. My ascendant is 23 Taurus. Yeah. So Monique, you're living this with that ascending point. Susanna says, I had hundreds of different poppy seeds last summer, and I did the same mistake, planted way too many seeds. I know better this summer. Yeah. See, it's only something you can really learn through experience, right? We're kind of afraid that we're not going to have as abundant of a garden, so we overdo it, right? So learning the balance of when to do less, I think, is important. Like it's setting limitations is what this decan is all about too. And sometimes when we garden, we have to learn that there's only so much room for a certain number of plants, and that's a limit that we have to respect. And if we don't respect that limit, the harvest that we have is not going to be as abundant or fruitful. Sometimes less will create more abundance. Does that make sense? Okay, or a healthier abundance, right? Kim is here, says, my moon at 26 Taurus, I lose my mind when I'm upset. Yeah, I mean, and that's, that is a challenging place for the moon, actually. Even though it is exalted in Taurus, having an emotional planet in a space where it's easy to feel overwhelmed with your feelings can lead to some challenging experiences. So, and there's also probably, Kim, your early childhood environment probably reflected a lot of the themes that we were discussing here, where there might have been things that were out of your control, that were just almost like forces of nature that you didn't have control over. And that probably led to some of those feelings where you might feel out of control emotionally as you try to reassert those boundaries in your life. And it's easy to overdo it. So just hang in there, Kim, and one day at a time, right? Rachel says, with Mars Mercury conjunct near Algol, I can attest to all of this. Yeah, Algol's a tough fixed star. Someone was mentioning earlier, trying to learn more about fixed stars. Algol's one of the ones that when people talk about fixed stars, they always kind of, their eyebrows start to raise and their eyes get kind of big, because it is one that is very powerful. It can be very protective in the positive sense, but it can also be very destructive in the negative sense. And this is something, Kim, that you might be experiencing with the moon very close to that fixed star, is it's easy to feel out of control. And some astrologers would speak to that as like the Medusa losing her head, like because her head gets chopped off by Perseus. There are other more I guess feminist perspectives where it is a powerful feminine energy, like the protective feminine energy. There's a version of that myth where instead of Athena punishing Medusa for her indiscretion in her temple, like I believe mating with Poseidon, or that she was raped by Poseidon and then was punished for that for some reason. But there's an older part of that story where Athena actually empowers her through her ability to turn people to stone, through turning her hair into snakes, to protect her from her aggressor. So there's something to think about with that too, is how that's where the apotropaic magic comes in, the protection part of Algol. But yes, recognizing that if it isn't utilized in a way where you feel that you are in control of that energy, it can be destructive. Okay. Michelle says, I only have Vesta in Taurus in the 5th, nothing else. Oh, well, Vesta is the keeper of the sacred flame, and that's an asteroid, also called Hestia. So there's a wisdom in Vesta placements where we may be passing on some kind of legacy. So passing on a material legacy, maybe teaching people about creativity or patience, maybe something that you could do, Michelle. Okay, so let's hear some questions that we can ask ourselves at this Taurus 3 new moon, because the new moon is going to be at 28 degrees of Taurus, hosted by Venus. We'll get into all those details in a minute. Okay. Questions you can ask yourselves. What results or consequences have your efforts produced? How much work is left and how much further to go? This is one thing I really liked about, I believe it was in Susie Chang's book, where she talked about the figure in this card kind of taking a pause from all the hard work. This is a decan of hard work, and just thinking about, oh man, I've come this far, but I've still got so much left to do. I think she was telling a story about her father or grandfather shoveling a driveway, and just watching him in the middle of it just take a break and be like, oh, I've done all this work so far, but there's just still so much further to go. So this may be the pregnant pause, right? Where you're trying to figure out, all right, I've come this far, now what? How do I sustain this energy over time so I don't burn out? This is part of the growth from Aries to Taurus. Aries is that force, that yang force that gets us started. Taurus is the energy that sustains that within a physical body, that philosophical impetus, and sustains it over the long haul. So you might also ask yourself at this new moon, what went wrong? Did you learn from this mistake? Okay. Again, not something to beat yourself up over. It's hard to learn from the mistake if you're constantly getting stuck in the trap of guilt and shame. This deck can produce a lot of guilt and shame. And I think that part of it can be unproductive. I think that there is some role for feelings of guilt and embarrassment and shame. I think all emotions are valid. And I think if we've done something that makes us feel that way, it is a message of how we need to make an adjustment. On the flip side, though, when that guilt and shame is imposed upon us from orthodox systems, because we aren't conforming to that system, I'm looking at you, destructive Catholicism. Like, and not all Catholicism is destructive. I don't want to demonize any specific religious tradition, but I've heard a lot of stories from ex-Catholics about overdoing it with the guilt stuff, right? So when that is imposed upon us, whether it's from a religion or from a society or from a family history, then we have to examine whether that is truly our own feelings or if it's something that is inherited just from other people's expectations. Does that make sense? So we know deep down inside when we've messed up, when we've just really gotten outside of our integrity, and feeling that guilt about that right away can be the instructions that we need to make a change. I kind of lost my temper with a neighbor the other day we'd been kind of going back and forth. Like there was some territorial issues around really this person kind of invading my personal space. And I set a boundary with them, and they weren't very happy about me setting that boundary. And they've kind of been shouting obscenities at me when I walk around the block, just minding my own business regularly, because they live literally like on the same block as me. And I kind of just lost my cool. This was yesterday. And I just was like, fuck off. Like, I'm just so tired of being harassed. And in that moment, it felt good. In what I have since thought about after that experience, and I share this because this is very Taurus III. When you have someone who can't regulate their emotions and may be struggling with their own mental health, because I do actually think that this person is, you're only feeding into it by engaging in the same type of behavior. And I had already been kind of having a bad day, and I'd already been feeling like my space had been encroached upon in a number of other different situations. And all I wanted to do was relax with my partner on a walk and not be yelled at from across the street. And in hindsight, though, every single time that has happened, we just kind of ignore it and go into our home and go on with our lives. And what I've probably done is fed into that, and probably I'm going to be faced with more of what I want to avoid. So I think that this is instructive to me, is when you're dealing with, abusive people, it is very important to maintain your composure. I think Taurus III can speak to maintaining composure in a difficult situation, because what that allows you to do is that if the abuse continues, if you've maintained your composure, you have a leg to stand on if you need to go to an authority and say, hey, this person's been harassing me, and I've been just chilling out, doing nothing, and here's the situation. But if you engage in the same behavior, then you've gone to their level, right? And that's, to me, that was embarrassing, because I don't enjoy losing my temper. But I think that it was instructive to me and said, oh, you know what? Maybe my stress levels have been a little too high lately. I need to kind of chill out. I need to not engage with this person, so that if the time comes where I do need to get a different authority involved, that I will have the center of integrity to be able to stand on. And I've had other situations in my life where I've dealt with abusive people, where it was very important that I maintained my integrity. And when we were in front of an impartial authority, that behavior served me very well and created a better circumstance for everyone involved. So I guess that's what I'm trying to share with you, is how can you maintain your composure even if you're in a negative situation where you want to lose your head, like Medusa or whatnot? How can you channel that energy into something productive rather than being drawn into the negative, destructive energy that is swirling around you? I try to be vulnerable on here on this channel. I know I'm not a perfect person, and I hope that by me sharing my screw-ups, that it's instructive. I think that what I wanted in that moment was a peaceful, sacred sanctuary. And by that, feeling unsafe in my own environment caused me to lash out. So I think that there also might be themes of that coming in this lunation cycle, especially with Venus in the second decan of Cancer. That is a decan that is all about sacred spaces and sacred sanctuaries and our desire for that. So if we're going to create that, we need to evaluate how we have been behaving to facilitate that in our own environment. Have we been making the compromises that are necessary? Have we been communicating in the way that is in integrity rather than feeding into a conflict that will, it's not going to solve the conflict is the point. After reflecting on that experience, I was like, is that going to solve the problem? Absolutely not. It's probably going to make it worse. So does that make sense? All right. Okay, let me look at the chat here. Fuzzy Angel Portraits by Meredith is here. That's a great screen name. I've been enjoying some chill house dance music on YouTube. Nice. Specifically Flavor Trip. They make food while they mix the songs. That's my kind of band there, Fuzzy Angel. Seems kind of Taurus in some ways. Fun to cook or paint pets. Yeah, I love pet art. My partner's mother does paint pet portraits and has done some really great ones of our cats. And there's another friend that offered to do a pet portrait for me that I never quite got back to them. I probably should have, but sorry if I didn't. And I do love the intimacy of having a painting of a beloved, cherished pet at the end of the day. So you're doing the Lord's work there, Meredith. I think maybe it is even you, Meredith, that offered to do a portrait for me. I'm so sorry if I didn't get back to you. Michelle says, Julene says, I've been told it's a good place for self-employment. What do you know about it? What is this in reference to? Oh, Vesta at 27 Taurus or 26 Taurus. Well, I'll let you guys figure that out. I do think self-employment and Taurus go well hand in hand. I have the moon in the second decan of Taurus and the midheaven in the second decan of Taurus on the midheaven. And I very much enjoyed just being my own boss. I don't necessarily want to be other people's bosses either. I think that's sort of a Taurus thing also, is we don't want to be told what to do, but we don't necessarily have to tell everyone else what to do. We just want to be left alone to do our own thing and let us be ourselves. I think that's the Taurus energy. I'm okay as long as, you just let me be me. Dawn says, at the end of the day, we are all human. We have breaking points. Bless you and bless them too, honestly. Yes, Dawn, for sure. And yeah, just be careful of your own breaking points with the new moon energy, and especially with the Mars-Pluto opposition and the T-square with Jupiter, because you may get to that point where you have more of that breaking point. So know that is coming and prepare mentally accordingly about how you're going to release stress constructively and have those steam valves in place. BB says Mercury at 19 Taurus and the eclipse did not engage, learned a lot from that moment. Good. Well, and sometimes we do have to engage, but it's how we engage is important. I turned 45 June 3rd. Well, happy early birthday, BB. Feels like I'm finally growing up. I love your authenticity. Spencer, nothing to be ashamed of. Yeah, I mean, this, again, try to be human on this channel. I don't profess to be any type of guru or anything like that on this channel. I'm just a guy that loves astrology and tarot and divination and try to share my experiences and try to create some sort of, if I am trying to set an example, it's one of, peace and kindness. And again, I'm not perfect at that. And that's part of the journey, right? Is learning how do we return to that when we feel anger, resentment, the negative emotions arise in us that inevitably will arise in everyone at certain points. How do you circle back to centeredness? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, self-employment. Yeah, again, I think it's more a Taurus thing about, we've had a conversation of that in the chat, where it's you just want to be in your own space and you want to be able to do your own thing. I think that's not every person who has major placements in Taurus is going to have the privilege of being self-employed, but it definitely might be something to consider if you have major placements in that. Okay, so I'm going to stop my share here. Actually, I think I went away from it too quickly. There were a few more questions on there. Just to finish up these questions, it says, did you rush something? Can it be redone correctly? Can you protect what you've cultivated from blight? Okay, protective energy. And where do you need to surrender to a higher power? Oftentimes we feel like we have to have it all figured out. And this decan keeps us humble by showing us that we don't, so just be gentle with yourself on this and other people, and try to manage your feelings rather than control them. I don't know if we can always control our feelings. We can manage them properly. We can express them in healthy ways. A lot of people have different methods of releasing tension in their life, whether it's exercise, whether it's journaling, creative outlets, whether it's music. I find a lot of peace listening and playing music. I've been trying to find peace out in my garden, but again, that's been a little bit challenging recently, but I am feeling pretty good about the progress that we've made so far. I think it is coming together. Maybe I'll share more of that on my Instagram page or stories. So follow me at Spencer Michaud on Instagram if you want some updates on that. But it is very cool to see a vision starting to come together. Illis J says, there's definitely an art and a science to dealing with neighbors and those around us. I agree, Illis J. As a 12th house sun and Mercury, I think my ideal would be to be out in the country with an enormous amount of space around me so that I could just go out in my backyard and just stare at the plants and the birds and the clouds and be in the liminal spaces without feeling the eyes of judgment. I think that's, as a Leo rising, and maybe other folks feel this way, but there is a feeling of sometimes we want to be in the spotlight, and there's other times where we just don't want to be seen at all. Or if we're not feeling at our best, we want to be able to go somewhere where we don't have to feel the heat of other people's eyes and judgment. And for me to do this work that I do here and do it, I hope do it with grace, I really need that. I really need that place where I don't feel like I'm on display or being judged at all. And as a Cancer, you want that at your own home. But I've been meditating a lot about how having a Scorpio IC or lower midheaven, and honestly, to be quite frankly, to have Uranus in my 4th house, is that I'm just going to have to learn to deal with some challenges and make adjustments to other people's energy in my home environment. And that's a lesson that I'm trying to figure out right now. So that might be part of my journey in the upcoming lunation cycle, is how can I find that peace while I have to still make compromises to what my idealistic vision would be. And that might be part of your process as well. Dawn says, been listening to a lot of Brene Brown lately. I never have when people recommend her for years. She has a nice perspective. Oh, nice. Dawn says, I'm in the country. Neighbors can still be a huge problem here. Yeah, that's good perspective, Dawn. And I'm glad you're sharing that, because I think that there is this cottagecore idealism about living out in the country and how it'll just be better if we just get away from it all. And my journey with almost purchasing a 5-acre farm in kind of the middle of nowhere was very instructive, because at that moment, I was also feeling like I was trying to get away from renting, and I found a stray dog out in the country and brought it home. It was a little Pomeranian. And at the time, my landlord, who was a nice, really nice guy, one of the best landlords I've ever had, we were really good friends. He used to live in the house with us. And I miss him. He's a good guy. But he didn't want dogs in the house. And I got really upset about it. And I was determined that I was going to find my own home. And I was being very stubborn about it and ignoring the red flags that were coming at every step of the way. And finally, there was a red flag that just we could not ignore anymore. And we had to just kind of let it go. And I told this story to a client the other day who had been going through some similar challenges. And the messaging I had around that was there was a reason why that didn't work. First of all, number one, the lesson was no matter where you go, there you are. And you can't get away from society. It doesn't matter how far in the country that you go. We are in this together, okay? And the second part of it was there was a reason why I was supposed to be here in this area. And it was very important for some of my family challenges that came up later for me to be in this area and turned out to be for the best. So in that case, the divine had a better plan, like surrendering like Taurus III does to the higher power. And you aren't going to know the reason for it until it happens sometimes. And that's part of the faith, is saying, you know what? The universe is supportive. And if I work with it, it will cradle me, right? Rather than fearing it. Having a healthy respect for the divine and for nature and for the challenges and danger that it can provide is important, without falling into the trap of being so paranoid that we can never enjoy our life, right? Okay. Yeah. So I'm just reading through the chat. Don says that's what we thought. 100 acres wouldn't be enough. 10 certainly isn't. Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have some neighbors somewhere, right? And yeah, I don't know. In my short time when I was out in the country, we heard a lot of like people target practicing and like gunshots all the time, and that was really frustrating. And there was always like someone mowing their yard, and it was very noisy actually. There was a horse farm next door that was kind of smelly, so maybe we quote unquote dodged a bullet, pardon the pun. But yeah, at the end of the day, human beings are social creatures, and we need to learn how to get along with each other, even with people that we don't vibe with. So yeah, and it's an ongoing process. Okay. Mioma is here. Says, I love your energy, Spencer. Oh, thank you. You radiate so much peace. I've been feeling so much anger lately, but listening to you helps alleviate that. I appreciate that, Momoa. And I'll tell you what, I don't know if you have some Cancer placements, but I've been feeling this Cancer Mars lately. I've been feeling angry a little bit. And I normally try to process my anger in ways that is healthy. And I try to model ways to deal with it maturely on this channel. So I really appreciate that comment. And I'm really tired of Mars and Cancer, though, is what I will say. I'm ready for it to move into Leo. And at the beginning of Mars and Cancer, I was able to use martial energy to like cut up all the dead wood on my property. And like I literally bought a chainsaw. I gave it a job. And I think as we've gone on in the process, I haven't had as much of a job for Mars to do. And that's been kicking around now. So then it just kicks around in my body and I feel frustrated. So what I would recommend, Mioma and everyone, if you feel anger, give it a job. Give it something to do that is constructive. There is an Orphic hymn to Mars, or to Ares, where they speak about, Ares, please turn our weapons of war into plowshares, which are basically gardening tools, so that we can work the land. Let's use that energy in a way that will help produce something rather than just destroy. Now, there is an interesting philosophical paradox that sometimes you do have to destroy something to create future growth, and that is important to recognize. But we want to be able to have that in our minds when we're directing that martial energy in some direction. Okay, yeah, Don's confirming the target range in the country, the target practice stuff. Yeah, that's so annoying to me. Okay. All right, Remco is saying perhaps we should move a bit right now and have a stretch break. That's a good reminder, Remco. So let's take a stretch. I will read the other comments here as we stretch out. Remco is helping us keep us healthy. Do me a huge favor, friends. Like this video if you haven't already. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Stretch your body out. That helps to alleviate some of the stress. Subscribe to the newsletter and turn on the notification bells for these live streams. That can help you know when we're going live, if you don't want to miss it. If you want to make a donation, folks, to the work that I do. I don't know what type of accent that is, but if you would like to contribute to the work that I'm doing here, just your presence is a great start, and your comments. But if you'd like to give a material Taurus-like donation, there's a little $sign in the chat that helps me keep the lights on, and it's called a super chat or super sticker. You can also contribute after the fact with a super thanks with a little heart, or you can buy me coffee at buymeacoffee.com, or purchase my webinars, or schedule a reading with me. That's another great way to support the work that I do, and to help bring some clarity to your experience. I always love meeting all of you who I get to meet you a little bit in the chat, but then sometimes I get to have more of an intimate exchange with you as we do work together. And I've been really enjoying getting to know all of you who have come and scheduled readings. So cheers, and thank you, Susanna. I love the little black cap. Thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate you. Okay. Yeah, Remco says movement is martial after all. That's a good point, Remco. Sometimes we just have to get it out. Go for a walk, go for a run, go and take a stick and I don't know, just, I don't know what you do with the stick. Just don't do anything too destructive, but gardening helps me, I think, if I can get some privacy. I have a situation here where there's just a lot of, our little area here has a lot of houses packed into a small area, and there's a lot of families here, and there's a lot of kids, and I love children, but sometimes they can, they're not necessarily peacemakers. Like I feel a lot of responsibility for the kids that are around in our space, and I get nervous because I want them to be safe. It's not the most like I can shut my mind off and drift energy. And in my mind, I'm like, I've already been through that with my own child. I feel like I've earned some time not to feel like I'm on all the time. Like I know I may be having that coming someday, maybe hopefully a ways in the future with maybe some grandkids, but just give me a decade to be just a regular adult instead of some kind of parent. Like when you become a parent at age 23, really early in your life, and it was not the easiest experience, you're like, geez, can we just have a break? Like, all right, so let's keep rolling. Okay, I'm gonna look through the chat before we get back to the chart, because you all have some great comments here. Dawn says, now you know how us Geminis felt for 7 months, and mine was in the 7th. So glad that the whole cycle is over. Yeah, with Mars in the 7th house, right, Dawn? Yeah, I hear that. You'll have to forgive me when Mars moves into Leo, because it'll be in my 1st house, so I might be extra spicy. I don't know. Maybe I'll need to start working out more, do more exercise, give Mars a job. And thank you for the super sticker there, friend. Thank you, Julene. Says, happy to catch the show this time. Much appreciate. Yeah, thank you. I hope everything's going well with you, and the Cardinals are looking good this year, right? Okay, Robert says, have written and decided not to send emails and Facebook posts during this time. It's true. It's much better to do some kind of domestic work, like dishes or cleaning or counting during these times of day. Yeah, Robert, I agree. I think I like that method of writing the email but not sending it. I've done that a lot in the past, where I've had times when people have been harassing me where I would love nothing better than to fire off the fuck you email like to them. Okay, and sorry to be crass, but that's the gist of it, right? And it would, again, like I talked about with the story earlier, all that would do is fuel the negative, fire. But that being said, if we are to be peacemakers, if we are to cultivate inner peace, we can't spiritually bypass our anger. Does that make sense? We can't just ignore it and repress it. And I've been guilty of this in the past, and sometimes it's bubbled up in weird ways. Cancers are notorious for this. We'll push things down until like one little thing that isn't related to the thing that we're actually upset about will set us off, okay? And I think it's important to acknowledge your feelings by doing something like writing an email to somebody, but not sending it, because then it's out there and it's out of your head. This is what I love about journaling and morning pages. In my morning pages, Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way, recommends this. And she's like, it's just brain dump. It's not creative writing at all. It's just, what are you feeling? Like, I feel like shit today. This person was a dick to me on my walk. This is my journal this morning. And I'm like, maybe I should figure out a better way to go through my day so that I'm not contributing to this negativity. And by getting it out on the page, it's not kicking around in your body, because it can really, if you repress that anger for too long, it can manifest as health challenges. Stress can lead to chronic disease. So think about that and how you can release it in a healthy way. And you don't have to feel guilty about the anger itself. Things make us mad, okay? Like, there's plenty of things that make me mad. I'm a Leo rising. I'm a fiery guy. Like, I'm peaceful on this channel, but I can get worked up about stuff, and I get pissed off a lot, and I have to learn how to deal with it in a way that is constructive and in a way that will lead to the results that I would like to have in my life, rather than perpetuate the things that I don't. Okay. This is why I like sports. This is why I talk about sports, and I love watching sports. When I was a kid, I had a lot of the same energy as a child. And my dad was like, I was a destructive child. Like, I would go to my grandparents' house, and I was really angry about like my parents splitting up and my step parents being mean to me, and my step brothers. And I had step brothers that were jerks that eventually weren't brothers, like, were just out of my life. And I would get real destructive at my grandparents' house. I remember I took a screwdriver, and this was at like age 6 or something like that. And there was drywall in the garage of my grandfather's house, and I dug a hole that was like a foot deep in the wall of the garage in my grandfather's garage, and he was not happy about it. And there was like duct tape over it for many years after that, as a kind of a reminder. And I would be very destructive as a young child. And my dad saw that energy and was like, we got to direct this in some way. And he got me involved in hockey and baseball and all of these soccer. But hockey was one where I could get that energy out. It can be a kind of a violent sport, and it just exhausted me. He's like, we just had to exhaust you. So that's a way that you can get that energy out, so it's not just kicking around in your body all the time. Okay, I'm just looking through this chat here. Susanna says, as a Cancer, I can relate to having to practice some anger management lately. Yeah, because we got Mars just firing us up. Cancer is I think it aspires to kindness. It is one of the signs that is associated with nurturing, loving, comfort. But, there's also the flip side of, like, protectiveness, overprotectiveness, territorialness, getting really emotional if we feel like we're not appreciated or respected or left alone when we want to feel left alone. That's what we can retreat into our shells also. Yeah, Momoa says they have a Cancer moon. Robert says, Cancer Mars has been very disruptive. Cancer rising here natally. I've found a tendency to be impulsive during Cancer rising times lately. Me too. I've been making some choices that I regret, like where I look back on and I'm like, I should have chilled out there. But we're coming to the end of that time. We have maybe a week left in that cycle, and I think that I hope things will improve with that, because when a planet is in its fall, like Mars is in its fall, a malefic specifically in its fall, it is a little bit more unpredictable, right? So Mars in Cancer can be like, we can either be very passive aggressive, or we can get really excited about something, and I mean excited in the negative way, out of the blue, right? So that's something else to consider, is that maybe when Mars moves into Leo, it'll become a little bit more sustained in the right way, rather than being this wild card. That being said, it is moving into a difficult relationship with Jupiter and Pluto. So we'll have to break that down, excuse me. Okay. All right. Let me look through this chat again. So many good comments. We're kind of going through all this together, aren't we? Julie, you're funny. My lollipop guild digression there before. Yeah. Dawn says, hit a punching bag. Yes. I need to get one of those. Yeah, and gardening does help, right? Love the dirt under the nails, you're saying, Dawn. I agree. I'm a fan of that. Right now, I'm struggling because I want to be able to go garden without being a babysitter to the neighborhood kids, and it's really honestly my problem right now. But we'll figure it out, right? This is life. These are the challenges that we have to work through. Nanda Devi says, my daughter is 26 and I'm still a parent. Yes, yeah. My daughter's 19, Nanda Devi, and we still have to parent. Yes, indeed. Dawn says, I can't imagine you being aggressive. You're so chill, but we all have two sides. Oh, Dawn. Oh, Dawn. I try to be as authentic as I possibly can on this channel, but I am not a perfect human being, and I have an intensity to me, and that intensity, I've learned to channel it through things like sports and music, but I can get pretty crabby sometimes. I can get pretty grumpy, and my anger is just as intense as my love, if that makes sense. And I've had to really monitor that as I've gotten older and work through trying to create, I don't know, beneficial situations rather than constantly feed into negativity. I've had a lot of people in my life growing up and in my early adulthood really push my buttons, and that's part of the 12th house energy. Like, think about this: Sun ruling the ascendant, Leo, in the 12th house. So the house of secret enemies. I've had a lot of people who have really pushed my buttons, and I've had to learn through my failing to maintain my integrity, how to shift my behavior towards being more humble, towards being more compassionate. And it's the compassion that you see on this channel, the desire for peace, has come through being forged in a fire of bullshit for a long time. So if you're going through this stuff, just there are choices that you get to make in that moment. And the choice is, are you going to maintain your dignity, or are you going to stoop to the level of your aggressor? And sometimes I've passed that test and sometimes I haven't, is I guess what I will say about that. But we all have the opportunity to make a new choice as we move forward. Okay. Oh, Dawn, thank you for the super sticker. Thank you. Oh, Julene, the Cardinals are good. The Suns. Oh no, the Suns. Oh, the Suns. I have thoughts about the Suns, but we can chat about that later, Julie. I'm not a Kevin Durant fan. Sorry, I just think he's sort of I don't know what the word is for it, a bandwagon chaser. Like he feels he's a Libra sun, and he feels like he can't do it on his own, and he always needs to try to chase the best situation for himself rather than try to carry the weight himself, which maybe that's part of his lesson, but I don't know. I'm a Bucks fan, so there's been a rivalry between Durant and the Nets, and especially the Suns with the Bucks too. I went through that series when the Bucks won the championship against the Suns. So interesting, those if you forgive me for this sports digression, everyone else but Julene, like the Bucks and the Phoenix Suns were actually incorporated into the National Basketball Association in the same year, 1968. So they share probably a chart. So I think it's really interesting that they met in the championship series, and those two franchises could have gone in very different directions based on the draft lottery, basically in '68, where the Bucks won that lottery and had the opportunity to pick Lou Alcindor, aka Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, rather than the next guy that was not anybody famous. So imagine, if just a ping pong ball had bounced in the other way, how those franchises may have gone in a separate direction. Interesting part of fate and fortune. Okay, so we're seeing other people are saying the FU email. Been there, done that. Yeah, it's okay to write the email. Just maybe think twice about sending it. Hello, Mortal Wild and Carol. We're talking about managing our anger. We're talking about atoning for our mistakes with this new moon in Taurus. We're talking a little sports, talking a little music, talking a little snacks, gardening. It's all good. Dawn says, oh yeah, talking more about the sending off the email. I'm just trying to get, sometimes the chat is a little bit behind where we're at. Yeah, Carol says anger is motivation energy. I like that. I think sometimes anger is important to get us moving, right? Mars gets us in motion. This is why it's actually difficult with Mars and Taurus, for example, because there is a tendency towards peace, rest, keeping things the same with Taurus, right? And when Mars gets there, it's shaking things up, and that's very uncomfortable for Taurus. It's sometimes when you have Mars natally in Taurus, you have the problem of inertia where it's hard to get going or it's hard to stop, and learning how to pace yourself with that Mars is important. Okay, so a number of great comments here. Yeah, Jolene, we'll have some talks about our friend Kevin Durant, but I agree with your comment. Ooh, Beth, that's a great word of the day. I think that we all need those. I got my snacks here. All right, friends, let's look at the chart. Let's look at the chart, and what I'd like to do is we'll take it through the houses. We'll talk a little bit about some of the other adjacent astrology, and we'll keep on rolling. I love the casualness of these talks. I appreciate that you allow me to go on some of these digressions. That it makes me feel supported, but at the same token, we should keep going. Okay, friends, so this is the chart of the new moon in Taurus 3. And this is May 19th, 2023, which is a week from today at 11:53 a.m. Eastern time in my time zone here. Make the proper adjustment for your time zone. And you can see that the moon and the sun are coming together, the first eclipse or non-eclipse for a few weeks, right? This is the sun and the moon are far enough away from the nodes, the north node and the south node, that this is not an eclipse. It's just a regular new moon. And it is being hosted by Venus in Cancer. So let's talk about that part first. So we have the sun and the moon coming together. We have a beneficial sextile to Venus, its host. And Venus is in that second decan of Cancer, which is related to the Three of Cups. So here is where I have my sun in this decan, so I'm familiar with this territory. You see the three graces, celebrating an abundant, harvest or something of that nature. And Austin Coppock in his book 36 Faces talks about sacred sanctuaries, right? The walled garden, he calls this decan. So what are we trying to achieve at this new moon in Taurus? Well, we may be trying to, like we've been talking about with my with my own challenges, with my own garden and my own sacred spaces, we desire a peaceful sanctuary where we can be allowed to just be ourselves without feeling like we have to put on a mask or make adjustments to other people or things like that. That may be the problem where I'm having right now, is that a sacred sanctuary doesn't mean that you just never have to compromise. Okay. So like, but that may be the energy that we're trying to create, a place that feels safe. And this is why, like, this another reason why I really like these longer explorations where we have so much participation in the chat. For me, these chats are sacred spaces. We've created and cultivated an environment of support for one another, of an ability to be vulnerable and share our stories, which can be somewhat rare publicly, right? And it can be very vulnerable to feel that way publicly. But I hope by me sharing, my own failings, that I've made it okay for you to share those things in your own life. And that can be a real relief, because we spend so much of our time and our energy trying to either anticipate what will make other people happy, or if we're going to be doing the right thing or the socially expected thing, or putting on a brave face, especially with social media like Instagram and things like that, like trying to create an image that will feel like, our best self. And I think that there's been a real movement towards greater authenticity on social media. And social media just, it promotes, they literally have filters for everything, right? And those filters can be physical filters. Those filters can be only telling people a certain part of your life and your experience. I'm doing this channel through a filter, a public filter, right? I don't tell everybody everything. I'm pretty honest, but there's some things that I keep for myself, and that's okay. We are allowed to have some privacy, even when we're in a position of being a public figure as well. So consider that this new moon may be about trying to harmonize your sacred, safe spaces, and will require you to evaluate how you've been doing that moving forward. And how do you remediate either your own behavior that has maybe created some negativity, as I talked about earlier, or like deal with things that are completely out of your control, right? There are going to be things that are out of your control, and then there are going to be things that are in your control, is maybe your reaction to it. This is something I've really had to learn as a 12th house ascendant ruler and sun and Mercury, is that there's going to be things in my life, it's baked into my chart, that I don't have control over, that I can, even if I've made the best plan in the world, that there may be something that comes up that I just could not have anticipated, that sometimes is painful. And the real challenge is, who do I want to be when those things happen? And that's the question we may have to answer at this new moon too. Who do you want to be when some things that come up that are outside of your control? Are you going to try to create peace with your community? The second decan of Cancer does show a communal celebration. Like, this is what we do every week on this channel, is we have a 3 of Cups experience, right? We have we come together, we toast one another, we lift each other up, we nurture one another. So Venus is going to be helping to support that energy. Mars is going to be moving out of Cancer at this new moon and saying, okay, what did you learn from this? It's going to be moving out of this energy where we may feel like we are either, getting mad at the wrong things, or domestic disharmony. I really do think that this new moon is, if we do the hard work of remediating the mistakes that we've made or the challenges that have come up to us through no fault of our own, that will help us to create more of that sacred energy, sacred safe space, domestic harmony that we deeply desire with Venus in the second decan of Cancer. Okay. First decan of Cancer that we have right now as I'm recording this, much more about individual relationships. So this might be the time to really like smooth over things with a partner, a business partner, a romantic partner, an individual. And then when the Venus moves into the second decan of Cancer, think about how that energy is going to be applied to more of a group effort. Okay, I do think there's a group effort, group celebration. Okay. All right. Carol says, I love the digressions. That's what makes it the Spencer Show. All right. Thanks, Carol. Appreciate that affirmation. Remco says, mutual reception between the moon and Venus configured by sextile looks supporting. That's a good point, Remco. So we have the moon in Venus's sign, and we have Venus in the moon sign, which, as Remco is pointing out, is called a mutual reception, which means that they are in each other's homes and they are providing resources for one another. And it's in a harmonious sextile relationship. Okay. So sextiles are of the nature of Venus. So a lot of times when we have like an energy like this, a sextile in particular, we just have to allow the good fortune to come to us. We have to be open to receive new knowledge, new wisdom, support, things of that nature. It's not the energy of like having to necessarily take an aggressive action. Okay. So this may be the new moon to be open to receiving feedback on how you are doing, like a progress report, and be willing to humble yourself enough to make changes. Now, this is where it gets really interesting to me. You can see that very shortly after this new moon, or actually shortly before the new moon, Jupiter has moved into Taurus. So we are going to be feeling the desire to expand our material abundance, to make plans. This is actually a Mercury-ruled decan, the first decan of Taurus, where we are planning for a materially abundant future. And with Jupiter there, it's just like, man, we are really ready to make some material plans and expand our sense of comfort and support system. Now, as I mentioned, Jupiter is moving almost immediately into a square with Pluto. And if you know anything about squares from the Thema Mundi, squares are of the nature of Mars. So remember when we talked about Venus as a sextile, and this is a technique that I learned from our good friend Adam Ellenboss, good friend of the show here, astrology teacher, Nightlight Astrology. He taught me this, or us this, at Nightlight, based on the relationships in the Thema Mundi, the relationships of these planets to each other or to the ascendant in the Thema Mundi. So the houses with Cancer on the ascendant, we have the Mars-ruled sign in the, let's see here, in the 4th house. No, Jesus, come on, brain. In the 10th house, which is a square. Okay, so Mars ruling that sign. Man, my brain is not working. I apologize for that. I mean, I'd have to see the Thema Mundi here. Let me see. So here is, okay, I know why this is. Sorry, forgive my brain fart here. So let's say this is the ascendant, because the Thema Mundi is a teaching tool by ancient astrologers. And we have the sun, the moon, and then you put Mercury here, Venus, and then Mars, etc. Okay, here's Jupiter, here's Saturn. Okay, so now we have the relationship between the sun and Mars as a square. And also we have the relationship between the moon and what would be the 10th house, and Mars repeated in a mirror image as a square as well. Okay, so this is the relationship of these planets to one of the lights. I hope that makes sense. I hope I've described that clearly. Okay, so you can see the sextile that we were talking about is the sextile between the sun and Venus in the Thema Mundi, and then the sextile between the moon and Venus from the 1st house to the 11th, and the sun to Venus from the 2nd house to the 4th house in the Thema Mundi. Okay, so I'm going to erase all that. That's a very long-winded way of saying that squares are of the nature of Mars. They create conflict, they create tension. Sometimes they make us angry, sometimes they make us frustrated. Sometimes there's misfortune, okay, that isn't necessarily our fault, okay? And I say that because Mars is of the lunar sect. The lunar sect was said to be related to Tukey, the random distribution of fate, whereas the solar sect was said to be related to the daimon, that is more about the actions that we take due to our own impetus, willpower, clarity, etc. So let's say like Saturn may be the result, Saturn challenges or oppositions. You could even make a philosophical argument that some of those challenges are a result of your own actions, okay? Whereas Mars squares may sometimes just be the challenges that come up that aren't necessarily your fault, that you have to deal with. So if we think about it in that regard, and we think about these two planets, Jupiter and Pluto, which is a really big part of this new moon and the energy moving forward, we have Pluto in a sign that has to do with the collective. Aquarius is about objectivity. It's about the laws that govern a community and a society, okay? And we may be having to reevaluate some corruption within the system that will make it, that may not necessarily be one person's fault. It's an accumulation of repressed energy over time that is now bubbling to the surface like a volcano to be reformed. So what I'm seeing with this, to be honest with you, like the way that this is manifesting in the United States, we're getting really, really close to Congress defaulting on our debt ceiling, okay? Because there is a disagreement and corruption in the way that the society is governed, where you have one party that is trying to hold another party hostage to make changes to the budget and not approving the debt ceiling, which it's a quirk of American politics where a normal budget conversation actually is tied into like some weird vote, I guess, and can be messed with. Like, I don't completely understand all the ins and outs of it, but the way that I view it, and other people may have a different perspective on it, maybe due to their political affiliation, is that right now we have a Democratic majority, I guess, in the government with the president and the Senate, but the House has a majority for the Republicans. And instead of approving the debt ceiling, the Republicans are asking for a lot of changes to the way that the American budget and social systems are set up, social safety net systems are set up. So again, how we support people with their resources. And there is some political brinksmanship that is happening between those groups where they're digging their heels in their positions and using the threat of a government default on their debt to try to get what they want politically. Now, am I absolving the Democrats of wrongdoing in this? Absolutely not. Both of these parties have real challenges, and there's corruption on both sides. So before you get so angry about me with that, it's all messed up. That's what I think. But at the same time, this standoff, which is probably going to get worse as Mars moves into Leo, like a day after. So here's you could see on May 20th. So we have this square between Pluto and Jupiter. And then we add into this mix Mars in a sign of, pride, like for lack of a better word, of, subjective desire, okay, where each of these parties wants what's best for them rather than what is best for the collective, potentially. And then we have just this stalemate, right? Between everybody just digging their heels in. No one wants to give an inch. And that could have really, really dire negative circumstances for the global economy. Because if the United States defaults on their debt, the stock market loses confidence in the government to like fulfill their debts and things like that. And consumer confidence is a big contributing factor to whether stocks do well and 401ks and all of this stuff. And the United States economy is very much connected with the global economy. So this is not just a United States issue. If the United States defaults on their debt, that could have a ripple effect on Europe, on China, and all of these places. It's a very bad thing if that happens. I hope it doesn't. We've gotten really close in the past, and then cooler heads prevail, sort of. But this time feels, I'm a little nervous about this time because there are a few radical people in American Congress right now that would love nothing more than the whole system to crumble. And that makes me nervous as far as them just like not cooperating just so that they create chaos. There are a few chaos agents in our American Congress right now that would love nothing more than to blow it all up. So keep your eyes out for that in your personal life too. This is a collective experience. But what I will say is that you may be experiencing something where you have a desire to expand your material resources, Jupiter in Taurus. It is coming into conflict with the desire for communal responsibility, Pluto in Aquarius. And once Mars moves into Leo, we may be more driven to get what we want versus to do what is right for the group. So I want you to examine that you may have some feelings of coming up with like, man, screw it. I want this. And I don't, this relationship with this community is messed up. And I want this material thing, this expansion, but it might be that your own pride could lead to the downfall with this. This is something to keep in mind. I'm keeping an eye on this because, I'm a Leo rising and this is an angular T-square. So if you have any angular fixed sign rising, so like Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, or Scorpio, this T-square is it's going to be pretty interesting. Again, there may be some things that are out of your control, some sacrifices you have to make for the collective good with Pluto in Aquarius. And you also may have to make material plans due to some things that are outside of your control. Okay. And then you're going to have to examine how you are contributing to the standoff or the conflict, potentially due to your own aggressive subjective desires. Okay. So this is all a part of this lunation cycle. And I think it's pretty funky. I'm already seeing the potential for this in my own life. Some of it probably has to do with my living situation and the good of the group versus my own individual desires. I'm looking at that Jupiter and I'm seeing, I want to do more stuff in my yard. And I'm not the only person that lives here, not the only family that lives in this house. And there maybe have to be some compromises that have to be made on everyone's part to maintain peace and harmony. And I could easily see any one of us get triggered as far as seeing as what we want versus what the reality is. So knowing that going in, what you can do is take a deep breath. Try not to let pride get involved in the conversation. Try to be as objective as you can, while also setting a healthy boundary for your deal breakers. Okay, does that make sense? Like, you may not get everything that you want with this T-square, but there may be something where you have a deal breaker where you say, well, this is my line. And you may also run into someone else's boundary where they say, this is my line. And there may be a point where you're going to have to make a compromise to alleviate the stalemate. Now, the good news about this is that Jupiter is in the overcoming square to Mars. And in traditional astrology, see, Jupiter is earlier in the zodiac. It is on the right side of center from Mars, from the shortest arc of distance. That's called the overcoming square. In traditional astrology, that is actually a very positive experience for a benefic like Jupiter to be in the overcoming square to a malefic like Mars. It helps to ease the pressure of that malefic placement. So by proper planning, by writing out an agreement, by hashing out the details, Mercury ruled Decan, okay, Jupiter there, you may be able to alleviate some of the conflicts that come from a sense of entitlement, a subjective sense of what the reality of the situation is and what your desires are. And you also may be able to alleviate some of the corruption that has been repressed in that group experience. The thing about Pluto to me is that every situation can fall into a state of disrepair eventually due to neglect. To me, Pluto is almost a planet of dealing with neglect. And sometimes we neglect things because we just had other priorities. Okay. So this is something that I think with Pluto is like, you know what? The time has just come to deal with it. There has been a clog in the toilet for a while. And if you, like, let's say your sink has been running very slowly, it's draining slowly, and you're like, I could get out the plunger and fix that or call a plumber, but I've just been so busy, this other priority, it still drains, it just takes a while. Eventually that sink is not going to drain, and you are going to have to get the plunger out, call the plumber, whoever it is. And the plumber, that's Pluto. It's saying you've ignored this for long enough. It's time to deal with it, and it's time for you to make a change. Okay? After the change is made, things start to flow better once again. So this is something to keep in mind with this configuration that a lot, is probably one of the more important ones of 2023 is the Mars opposite Pluto with the T-square with Jupiter. And again, it is very much a part of this lunation cycle. All right. So I have some chats here and a question. Remco says, question, how do you interpret the trine aspect of the moon to Pluto shortly after the new moon? That's an interesting question. Well, the trine to Pluto is going to come from the first degrees of Gemini. So if we look at the aspect that Remco is discussing here, let me move it for a minute. We go back a few hours, we're going to see the trine at 1 degree, 0 degrees actually. Okay. So very shortly, a couple hours afterwards, right? Not even a day afterwards, Remco is pointing out there's a trine from the moon, Pluto. I think that, the seed is planted to show us what really wasn't working. Okay. Like, I think that there's a realization as far as like, you've made a mistake. This isn't really working. Now what? And then when the moon moves into Gemini, I think what that does is that encourages us to explore options of what can work. And by its connection to Pluto, it's acknowledging that, just like I said with Pluto, what have we been driving underground, under the surface, neglecting, that needs to be dealt with now? And when the moon first moves into Gemini, you may be a little bit overwhelmed by all the different options, communications, and directions that you could head, and you may feel a little bit stuck. Okay. And that's Gemini 1, the 8 of Swords. So to work through that, there's an exploratory phase that you need to go through to be able to root out some of the neglected, stuck energy. And a lot of it comes through communication. I know in my own domestic situation, oftentimes the tension comes just through a failure to communicate properly. And by having difficult conversations or by being direct versus passive aggressive, I'm guilty of this sometimes. People will say, "Oh, you're so nice on your channel," and I am nice. Kindness is a value that I have, but sometimes I'm so afraid of conflict that I will avoid it because my dad taught me this. My dad was a master conflict avoider, and I have to learn that sometimes that I need to face something with integrity, not with just anger or like a temper tantrum, and be able to have a difficult conversation, a air clearing conversation with somebody, rather than just brooding on it. What I will do often is I will not acknowledge a problem sometimes, and I'll brood on it, and then some little unrelated thing will just trigger me and I'll get very cranky about it. And I'm realizing more and more honestly, through the grace of my amazing partner, Tanya, who's been a guest on the show, through her Capricorn rising way of dealing with things, it's really, she's very good at maintaining her cool under pressure and under fire. And she has kind of what we like to describe the HR voice, where if she's in a crisis situation where people are just dumping all sorts of emotional challenges on her, she can be like, okay, how'd that make you feel? Okay. Like she has you Cap risings have an ability to like say no without saying no directly, like, which I appreciate. And for a Cancer sun who gets emotional about things, that's just a really beautiful energy. And I think that's why there's a lot of Cap risings that are attracted to this channel and to my work, because there's a good balance point to that. The downside of that is sometimes it's hard for Cap rising people to feel their feelings and to really acknowledge how they are feeling. And sometimes they do feel this stuff, but they're able to push it down to the point where then it just erupts in a weird way, and that can be unhealthy. So there is beauty in being able to maintain your composure in situations, and there's also beauty in being able to correctly express those feelings. So it's a balance, okay? All right. So I hope that answers your question about the trine between the sun and Pluto, Remco. Remco says, looks like a seed, new moon that creates deep roots, Pluto that may strengthen the growth, Jupiterian aspect. Yes, I like that, Remco. Good analysis. I like it. And thank you for the super chat there, Remco. It says air clearing communication. Cool, Cap rising here as well. Yes, Remco. This is why we're good partners, Remco. See, you're my HR guy in the chat. You're keeping everything civil, and like, I love that you volunteered to take on the responsibility of maintaining the boundaries. Which is a great use of Capricorn energy, is being able to take on things that sometimes other people won't. You all are able to shoulder such a heavy burden sometimes, and it really is something to marvel at. And it often goes unappreciated. So I just wanted to give you a shout out and thank you for that, Remco. Don says, we've got to quit spending so much at some point. We can't operate our house in this kind of perpetual outstanding debt that is not getting any smaller, only much, much larger. Well managed, though. We did when President Clinton shut down the government for months over the budget. Yeah, I mean, again, there is a lot of different, there's a lot of competing either philosophies, there's a lot of competing desires, there's a lot of competing needs that a government, when it is functioning in a healthy way, should be able to handle. And the core of what I feel, my perspective on it, the core of what a government should do is be able to provide beneficial services for its community. Now, people will argue and debate about how much we should spend here and how much we should spend there, and how we can balance our budget and where the money goes, as far as like when you do like things like taxes, we're all contributing to each other's well-being. The problem we have in America is that we feel like we've been fed the myth that, if you only just work hard enough, you will be able to pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. And then, if you're falling on hard times, it's your own fault because you haven't worked hard enough. And that's part of that is the puritanical work ethic that we've inherited from some of the immigrants that were here early on. Some of it is honestly part of a method of power and control, to keep people in servitude to the oligarchical rich folks that want to keep people working in their interests instead of in their own interest. So it's both. And again, there are definitely inefficiencies when you have a country as big and as abundant and powerful as America. There are definitely things that have fallen into corruption on both sides of a political spectrum. And do I have all the answers to that? I do not. Like, if I did, I'd probably have a more successful career in politics. But again, I'm more of an observer of these things. I try to participate as much as I can, especially when it is important for me to participate for the specific purpose of protecting people that may not have the same type of privilege that I have been born into, whether it is through either economic status, through my demographic, through being a white cisgendered American male. I think it's important to get out and vote, especially when someone who might not have a voice can do that. So we could keep debating. I agree. We don't want to spend money on things that are, not important. But the things like the debt ceiling, though, like that's, to me, that's, yes, there's some bloated spending in the government, but a lot of the things they're arguing about is cutting way back on social safety net programs that a lot of people really depend on to get through their lives, and are, really, like, the amount that we put into that is so minuscule compared to the amount that we put into, like, the military industrial complex. It's just, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy that comes with that. So now we'll shift towards a different conversation topic. But I did want to just point out, though, that I do feel like we will see some standoffs with this Jupiter, Pluto, Mars configuration in the American government. I just been looking at that and I've been like, oh boy, this is really just going to be a shit show as far as, like, people just digging their heels in. And I hope that it isn't as bad as it looks astrologically, because maybe they will figure it out. We usually do. Like, in America, what happens is, Wall Street is sort of like, are you really going to default on your debt? Because that's going to screw everybody out of a lot of money, and you better just get your shit together. And they see how far they can push something for any political agenda. And then when they realize that they may not get what they want, they come to some kind of compromise. I'm a little nervous about that because, like I said, there's been some very radicalized people in our American Congress that have had more of a voice than they normally would have. And those folks don't care about the average person. They are just there to disturb the functioning of the government itself. And that to me is really negative. Okay. Robert says, Spencer, I appreciate your analysis of Jupiter, Pluto, Mars. I think the real concern with the same analysis should be directed to the Ukraine war policy, not the debt ceiling crisis. That's interesting, Robert. I will say I'm not as familiar on that political challenge and the ins and outs of that. I think that it could be applied to a lot of different, global challenges that we're experiencing. And I will just plead ignorance on what's going on with that at the moment. So I don't have a good analysis of it. I've just been thinking a lot about the debt ceiling issue. So that's why I chose to focus on that. But that's a good point, that these are things are happening in different countries too. It's not just the American experience. There's probably other people who are like, oh, I can see how those types of themes could be applied to some challenges we're experiencing in this country. So think about it like that also too. And thank you so much, E. Chandri, for your super sticker there. Appreciate you. Kate says, Spencer 2024. No, thank you, Kate. I think that it takes a certain type of personality to want to get involved in politics. And I think there are too many ethical compromises that I would have to make to run for office to even get elected. And that's not, first of all, I'm just not suited for that type of work whatsoever. I would much rather be either an artist or a philosopher or an astrologer who is observing these things from the outside, who could, maybe still can have an influence that way. A lot of times the artists in our life can have an impact that a politician can't have, because what we do is we hold a mirror up to people. And ultimately, Kate, if I have held a mirror up to some of these issues through the lens of astrology, and that has helped this community understand maybe what might be happening politically, that empowers them to go vote based on their newfound knowledge, and that in turn changes the system as well. So we shouldn't be passive participants in this. We need to be active participants, but it should always be through the lens of being well informed, well educated, really understanding the system that you're a part of and what you're trying to achieve, and ultimately trying to show up with compassion for your fellow man, I think, or fellow person, right? I think that that's something that's really important if you want to get into a political conversation. At the end of the day, are you trying to make people's lives better, or are you trying to take away, fundamental rights that they have? And I will always land on the side of trying to help make people's lives better rather than to deny them their rights. So anyway, Remco says, loves these lives, always managed to point out some new learning study subjects, contributing my bit by moderating is fun. Yeah, you're doing a great job, Remco. Thanks for being here today. Right. Kate says, if there are power struggles between Mars and Pluto, at least this time there's a moderator overseeing things, Jupiter. Yes, that's a great point, Kate. And that's exactly what Jupiter is doing in this case. Is I do think that there is some kind of impartial power that, and then the I-Ching talked about this too. So that's a great point, Kate. The I-Ching, I think, describe this, and I'm trying to remember if it was the I-Ching I got for this new moon. It wasn't. What's funny, Kate, is I was asking the I-Ching about one of my own personal situations with my own communal challenge I've been going through, and it described really Jupiter in Taurus, like some kind of impartial mediator trying to help find a compromise in a situation. So I think that's a nice, astute observation. Okay. Well, thanks, Kate. If I ever, decide to run for mayor of Crazy Town, I'll let you know. Oh boy. Yeah. Oh man. There's the political system in America it has just gotten so contentious that it's even just hard to discuss issues with people in a rational way anymore. That it makes me so nervous even to even touch on it, because people become so irrational on all sides about how to have a discourse with one another. And I'm liberal and conservative, both. There's just so much passion around it, and I wish that there would be an ability to have productive conversations with folks once again. And the internet has really made that hard. The internet, it's very easy to radicalize your voice on the internet, and when you don't have to see how your words affects people emotionally on their face, it leads to all sorts of extreme positions. And honestly, the internet is set up to radicalize us. It is set up to put us into echo chambers so that we don't necessarily get an alternative perspective. So if you want to do good for your community, your political community, just try to listen to as many people and perspectives as you possibly can, and then make your decision around that, rather than just only focusing on a small area. I had to really do this as an adult. For those of you who haven't figured it out yet, I'm pretty liberal in my political stances, okay? But I've had family members that weren't. I had a stepfather that was a police officer in Chicago and very conservative, and he and I have had a lot of interesting conversations, a lot of arguments, but a lot of conversations where at the end of the day we had to either agree to disagree, or we let the things that connected us carry us forward, right? Our compassion for one another. Like, for example, like his father stormed the beach of Normandy in World War II and died on the beaches of Normandy when he was less than a year old. And that really shaped his character and shaped his perspective and shaped his patriotism. And I didn't have that background. I didn't have that mythology. And it really, helped me understand where he was coming from and why he chose the work that he did and why he believes or has to believe so deeply in a patriotic story, because he has to justify that loss. And I have compassion for that. That was a great sacrifice that his father made. And I understand some of his positions. That doesn't mean that I've allowed him to, have an abusive perspective with, I've challenged him on some of his perspectives that I thought were narrow-minded, I guess I will say. But these are the conversations that hopefully, if you have them, even with a family member, right, that you allow the things that you have in common and your compassion for one another to, at the end of the day, allow your humanity to be what wins rather than your ideals. Okay, so let's move forward. So that's a breakdown of the Mars, Pluto, Jupiter square / T-square. So what I would like to do now is I'm going to briefly take I'm going to quickly take the eclipse through the houses. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this fancy schmancy sheets thing. This is sun sign wheels. I'm going to have to pull this up again because I didn't do this in advance this time. Okay. So I'm going to share this. So can you all see that now? So this is a feature in Astro Gold, a Mac program. This is our version of being able to like move it through the houses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in and see if we can go through rising sign by rising sign. Okay, so we're going to start with Aries again, as we are apt to do. Okay, there we go. All right. Yeah, and Kate's pointing out that some folks will never see eye to eye, but disasters don't discriminate, though. And through experience, people can change. Yes, I think that's a great point, Kate. And I think that this is one of the lessons of Pluto and Aquarius. It's like, we're all in this together, and we're all going to have to make changes. And that is really, nature is the great equalizer. This is a really important lesson with Taurus III. I'm really interested to see what happens when Uranus in particular moves into Taurus III, because I think that there's going to be more forces of nature surprises that are going to come up with Taurus III Uranus. Okay, the shock of awareness that, oh my God, there's this force that's beyond our control. And yes, it is a great humbling experience that we see in relationship to nature sometimes. All right, so here is Aries rising. So Aries rising, hold on, let's take a little stretch before we dive into this, because I need to move my body a little bit and get a little snack. Thank you so much for being with me here today. We're heading into hour 2, almost hour 3. We've gone down many roads, politically, sports-wise, all sorts of things. We try not to shy away from controversial topics on the show, but at a certain point, you got to know what can be achieved on a astrology live stream, like versus things that people have been debating for a really long time. And I've just had a lot of interactions with a lot of different types of folks in my life. I've just had to. I have a lot of international friends in this group. My partner is Black, and so that's a whole different set of experiences that I witness firsthand, and trying to understand and have compassion for her experience versus mine. And it doesn't make me any more enlightened or anything like that. It's just very interesting to be able to talk with somebody regularly about how they see the world, and the challenges that presents. So that definitely has shaped some of my experience as well. And I have lots of friends that are either neurodivergent or have different sexual preferences and things like that, and getting their perspective. And there's just so many different ways to be in the world, and I think it's valid. It's all valid. Everyone's living and doing the best that they can with the circumstances that they've been given, the challenges that they are facing. And at the end of the day, everybody's got some challenge and hurdle that they're trying to overcome. And why would we try to make it more difficult for them to do that, or each other to do that? I think that's where I stand with all that. It's just, man, it's so hard just to be human. Why do we need to make it more difficult on each other? You know, let's try to uplift one another. Okay. Monique says, I've spoken to conservative people and listening to them, I hear a lot of fear. It is very sad. Yeah, Monique, honestly, I mean, that is a true statement. But also there's a lot of liberal folks are afraid too. I mean, everybody is afraid right now. Like, so I think that fear is predominant in the society. And I think that we have to start examining how our fear affects all of us. So I have compassion for that fear, and what part of that fear is valid, because fear is an emotion that it is, there's a reason why we have it. It was a defense mechanism and a survival mechanism as we, worked through nature and our relationship to it. Fear is something that can keep you alive at various times. Imagine you're off in a cave and there's a saber-toothed tiger that's, right outside the cave. You're probably going to be pretty afraid, and you're going to take a different action than if you didn't have that response. But there's not always a saber-toothed tiger outside the cave. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, in that moment, when you're facing that particular fear, that energy is appropriate. When that saber-toothed tiger saunters away, but if you're still staying in that heightened adrenal state, it's not serving you, it's exhausting you. And this is what we have so much difficulty with as a community recently. Everybody, liberals, conservatives, centrists, whatever it is, whatever you want to label it, is we're getting so worked up in our fight or flight experience that we can just never relax anymore. We always have to other people. We have to make somebody wrong. And liberal folks are just as guilty of that as conservative folks. So how can we start to think about things more on a human level rather than drawing lines in the sand? And also, because we live in a society where we have access to so much information all the time, it can be very overwhelming to see all of the pain that every human being experiences on every corner of the planet. In the past, we had to deal with a trauma maybe once every few weeks or months, a disaster that hit your town once every 2 or 3 years, or your family every couple, whatever. But now there's a new disaster every other day, or every day, every minute. You can find a disaster every minute if you look for it. And that puts us in this heightened state that is very challenging to come down from. And at some point, we're going to have to figure out how to just live our lives in a way where we don't have to live in that heightened state all the time. It has its use and it has its moment, but how do we as a community just be like, you know what? that's not a reason to be scared right now. We don't want to be scared all the time. And in our defense, in everyone's defense here today, something like a global pandemic can put you in constant fight or flight mode. We've gone through a significant trauma where 7 million people on the planet perished because of that, where everywhere you go could be a dangerous situation. So acknowledging that grief, that pain, and this is something I'm going through too. I'm still working through those feelings. It takes time. It takes time to heal that. It takes time to feel like we're safe. And I think we're going to have to facilitate that with each other, that feeling of support, so that it's okay for us to feel, to calm down, instead of having our fists clenched all the time. Okay. Yeah, Julene says, I wish we could focus more on our commonalities than our differences. I've always had a hard time understanding why we can't do that, or at least do no harm. It's a great point, Julene. I could continue to pontificate on why that is. I have some thoughts on that, but probably should keep going. My short answer is that I still do firmly believe that there is a small portion of people that are consolidating resources that would love nothing more than for the people that don't have resources to keep fighting each other, so that they can kind of, keep perpetuating their massive amounts of wealth behind the curtain, while everybody gets bent out of shape about smaller matters than what is really the main matters. And I'm not even talking about like just normal wealthy people. I'm talking about like the uber crazy, nobody should have that much money type of people. And I don't know if it's always intentional, but the system has been set up where there's a lot of misdirection as far as getting people riled up. And I think that we need to work on that. And I think that the best thing we can do as just common citizens is try to see our commonality, as you suggest, Julene, and what we can work on together so that we can have a more fair and just community. Okay. Yeah, Julene says, I hate to see a cataclysmic event that strips us down to nothing and we are forced to work together. I mean, yeah, but it might. This is funny, Julene, because how much more cataclysmic does it have to be, right? Than like literally a global disease that people can't agree on if it's real or not. Like that has almost broken my brain as far as all of that goes. And if you haven't seen the movie Don't Look Up, you should go check that out, because that really satirizes that energy. Like when literally you're seeing a comet coming to destroy the planet and people can't even agree on if it's real or not. And honestly, that movie just like blew my brain out, because that's exactly how it would be. That's exactly how it would be. Even facing our imminent annihilation, people would probably still not be able to completely agree on something. And you're right, that is sad. Like, it's so sad. But that's the world that we have right now. And what I will say about that is that you don't necessarily have to be that. If you are hearing this today, you can be somebody who is trying to add some good to the world, that is trying to cooperate with others and see a different perspective. Your actions can affect the collective. You don't have to be just an island of disappointment, right? And if you want others to get on board, set an example of kindness, set an example of tolerance, and those actions will multiply. All right. Okay. So Aries rising, new moon is going to be in the second house. So there may be something with your financial life, Aries rising, where you may have been impulsive with your spending. You are having Jupiter move into your second house this week. So there's planning that has to be made and has to be done. Maybe there is some smoothing over that needs to happen and some discussions that need to happen within your family, around your house, around your the cooperation with your domestic situation. And then you're going to be feeling this tension of the T-square between, your 5th house and your 11th house and your 2nd house. So there could be some challenges around, the groups that you are a part of and your own personal expression and your financial involvement within it. Could also be potentially like some kind of conflict with a child that you have, or like somebody that is dependent on you, where you've been supporting someone, but maybe it's time for them to stand on their own 2 feet, and that could cause some tension as well. So re-evaluating how you make your money, how you distribute it, and all of those things can be up for discussion as well. And keep in mind, Mercury is turning direct at 5 degrees of Taurus on Sunday, the 14th. So you've been reviewing this the whole time. Okay. So let's go on to, I'm going to go through these quickly, friends, because we've been here a while. And this is Taurus rising. So Taurus rising, another angular rising sign. This is happening in your 1st house. This may be you reevaluating how to put yourself out there about how your personality and character may have an effect on the world around you. You have Jupiter moving into your 1st house, so that there's expansiveness about how you are feeling your sense of self. Maybe you have a newfound freedom that you didn't in the past. I know we've had some discussions with a friend of the show here that is starting a new life as an individual after a marriage had broken up. So there's, now figuring out what works and what doesn't as far as how you support yourself. Venus is going to be in your 3rd house, providing maybe a respite with your local community, with your siblings, if you have them, with your with a learning process, with your everyday routines and habits. This is something that's third house energy as well, is being able to ritualize your daily life and bring harmony to it. There may be some tension between your family life, your professional life, and how you show up for that, with the tension between Jupiter, Mars, and Pluto, between the 10th, 4th, and 1st house axis. Again, an increase with the North Node in the 1st and a decrease in the 7th house of relationships. All right, Gemini rising. This is a new moon in your 12th house, which is related, generally on the more positive side, related to how we create solitude within our life, how we retreat, how we adjust to circumstances that are outside of our control. On the more intense side of the Hellenistic viewpoint, it is a house of secret enemies, self-undoing. There could be some new ways that you're trying to deal with things that have gone wrong in the way that you either create rest or space for yourself. Jupiter is moving into the 12th house, so the action that you can take to create abundance may be just chilling out and doing less. Okay. Venus is in your 2nd house, trying to help you to create harmony in your personal finances. Mars will be moving out of the 2nd house and into the 3rd, creating some tension between your belief system and the way that you ritualize that belief system, and also the way that you may utilize that belief system either towards a sense of inner peace or in ways that may, bring you some challenges with the square to Jupiter in the 12th house. So I guess Gemini rising, you've had Mercury retrograding in your 12th. You've been reevaluating how you either show up for life or retreat from life. And this is a good time to kind of, don't push the river. Mercury's still gaining steam again. You'll probably feel a lot better once Mercury moves into Gemini and in your 1st house. And, heed the messages of Saturn in the 10th. Like, this is an important time to ask yourself what it really means to show up in the world. And is it really an authentic expression of who you are, and what stories are you telling yourself about your career and your work life as well. Okay. Kate says, my little Gemini rising is sitting next to me eating a banana peanut butter toast sandwich and a mango. Taurus moon. That sounds good. I need a snack right now. Well, as far as, a child Gemini rising, just encourage her to slow down, to do less, and relax a little bit, right? Let her have that snack and just enjoy life. Okay, Cancer rising. Cancer rising has this new moon in the 11th house of groups, friendships, people that you share a belief system with, money and benefits from the government or the king, with the second house from the 10th. This is everything that supports the actions that you're taking out in the world. There could be like a future-orientated consciousness with this, because the 11th house often shows us the results of the actions that we take publicly. You have Jupiter moving into your 11th house, so there may be an expansion of your ability to join with others that you have a shared sense of purpose with. This is really going to be changing your identity, potentially. Like your own sense of creating a new sense of self may be found through joining with others and through creating harmony or atoning for mistakes that you've made in relationship to other people in the group as well. Mars is going to be moving out of your first house, which is probably really good news for you, because you've probably been feeling pretty worked up or maybe had some inflammation lately. And it's going to be moving into your second house, asking you to evaluate, your financial resources. There may be some tension between how you spend your money and how you share financial resources with another partner or somebody else, some other. And that may be putting some tension on your 11th house of groups. Although relying on your friends is a good thing. Like, I think Jupiter, with all of these, look to Jupiter to help alleviate the tension between the Mars-Pluto opposition. So like for Gemini rising, your sense of solitude can help alleviate that tension. For Taurus rising, relying on your own perspective and resources can help you alleviate that 4th and 10th house opposition. And then for Aries rising, your own ability to support yourself can help alleviate tension between, 5th house matters and the of like your own personal creativity and perspective, or with your children, or with a more public group centered enterprise. Okay, so that is Cancer rising. Let's go down to Leo rising. So Leo rising, the new moon is going to be in your 10th house. And this is going to be asking you to reevaluate how you've been showing up in the world publicly, in your career, how you're putting your energy out into the world, the face that you project out into the world. Jupiter's moving into your 10th, so this could be a really fortuitous time to expand what you're doing professionally, although there will be some tension maybe between your own desires and the desires of the group. So how can you balance out through communication and planning the needs that you have as an individual versus the needs of the others in your life, the community in your life? You've probably been putting a lot of more energy into your career lately and reducing your energy at home. I've gone through this with the nodes in Taurus and in Scorpio. My daughter went off to college with those nodes, and I've been putting more energy into my work. Since she's moved down, I've had more time to focus on that. So your Venus energy, Leo rising, is coming from the 12th house of solitude, peace. I'm just laughing because we spent the whole first hour of this show like talking about like the challenges of getting solitude. Here's the good news. I love this from just my own personal perspective. Mars is going to be moving out of your 12th house, so the disruption to your peace is going to start happening. If you've been having trouble getting peace, as have I, with some of the disruptions in my domestic environment to getting peace, Venus is really going to be just saying, you know what, now you can relax. Now there's this T-square thing, but it might be a little bit easier to get some of that peace. All right. Thanks, Beth. Appreciate the nice comment. So Virgo rising. Virgo rising is going to be experiencing the new moon in Taurus in the 9th house, which is related to belief systems, higher education, long distance journeys, but for a specific purpose, or journeys for a specific purpose. Distance isn't really the factor in ancient astrology. It's more about, is it to find meaning or not? So there may be a new way of how you are relating to your meaning making in your life, Virgo rising. You've been reevaluating your belief systems. You've been reevaluating maybe your relationship to higher education, to the legal system, things of that nature. And now it's time to remedy any false beliefs that you might have or something of that nature. Mars is moving out of your 11th house, and Venus is going to be, bringing you some nice experiences through the groups that you are a part of. Mars is going to be moving into your 12th and opposing your Pluto. So there may be some disruptions in the way that you retreat from the world, the peace that you're getting, and you may have to figure out how hard you need to work and when to retreat. And that could be a difficult conversation that you're having. Fall back on your ethics when it comes to when to get involved and when not to. Like with Jupiter, being in the overcoming square to Mars, your sense of what is right can help you figure out whether you need to get to work or to sit this one out. And there's, sometimes it's okay to not have to get involved. Sometimes it's okay to be like, I'm going to delegate that to someone else. And it's a hard thing for Virgo folks to do. But I think that this is an opportunity to learn how to do that more gracefully. Libra rising. Libra rising has a new moon in the 8th house, which is related, amongst other things, to shared resources, the money of the partner, as well as to inheritances, legacies. It is related sometimes to fears that we have in addition to the 12th house. So there may be some things where you're having to reconcile some of the ways that you may create challenges for yourself through being scared of something. You've been really reevaluating some of those things recently that may be holding you back. Mars is going to move out of your 10th, and Venus is going to have sole possession of the 10th house there, where your career is going to, a lot of the things that you've been dealing with maybe some conflict within your job or your public life, or even with your mother perhaps, are going to start probably to be smoothed out. And then Mars is moving into the 11th house, really potentially creating some challenges where, with your group consciousness and you having to reevaluate your creative process with Pluto opposing Mars from the 5th house. So a lot of times 11th and 5th house issues are about like, what are the needs of the collective or the group versus my own creative needs? And there could be some tension with that. But with the 8th house, try to find a compromise that works for both parties. You're good at that, Libra rising. I mean, that's part of your entire jam here. So look to Jupiter as far as how you can either support someone else or figure out how to multiply your resources so that you both can benefit, mutually beneficial relationship. Scorpio rising. Here we have another angular fixed sign for the new moon. This is in the 7th house, and that's related to relationships, to completion, to any type of partner. So there may be some kind of partnership issue where you're having to reevaluate what has worked and what hasn't. You've had Mercury asking a lot of questions about your, material resources within a relationship. Jupiter is going to start helping out now in the 7th house. helping you to make material plans with your partner. Good news for you, Scorpio rising, is that Mars is going to be moving out of its fall in Cancer, which is probably going to feel a little bit better. You've been kind of having a lot of existential crises lately. I would imagine, with Mars in Cancer in the 9th house. The challenging news is that it's going to move into your 10th house, and there may be some career issues that come up where there may be some tension between your public life and your private life. There may be something going on in your private life that really has been neglected for some time, and you may want to put a lot of your energy into your public life, but that energy and that willpower may create some tension in your home life. So try to have fruitful conversations with your partners, especially. That can lead you to some successful outcomes with Jupiter in the overcoming square to Mars. And then, Venus in the 9th, that's just really nice for maybe you need a vacation or something. Maybe Scorpio rising, maybe it's a good time to just take a trip or start a new course of study, or just just allow things to be. Maybe not have to force the issue with beliefs, right? Maybe not arguing over your beliefs, and trying to, maybe new harmony is coming through an agreement that's coming through that. Potentially even a new legal agreement, potentially. Okay. So let's keep on rolling. I feel like Monique's daughter. Come and get by the cookies. She's so adorable. Yes, I don't know if that's still up on the internet, but man, I can't remember her name. She's just this little. She's like 7, and she's got a really beautiful little voice, like where it's very sing-songy. So that was something I really got a kick out of. Like, it's no wonder she sold so many Girl Scout cookies. Helps when you're cute, right? But I digress. So Sagittarius rising. This is a new moon in your 6th house, where this could be a new cycle that will help you to unearth some of the challenges that you may be having with your health. It could be some helping you deal with some misfortune that's come to you, an injury or an illness that's not necessarily your fault. Although I will say that Pluto is going through your 3rd house, really, really causing you to reevaluate some of your daily habits. And by being honest with yourself about what your habits are, that may lead to a better sense of health along the way. You may also have to reevaluate how much work that you're doing right now that you're not getting credit for. That's another 6th house thing, where it's like, oh, there's things that we have to do that we don't necessarily get the parade for at the end of the day. But we need to make sure that what we're doing is still moving us forward towards the ultimate goal, I guess. Mars is going to be moving out of your 8th house. So if there's any conflicts with shared resources, Venus is going to be kind of taking over sole possession of that house and smoothing out those conflicts. But then now Mars is moving into your 9th house, challenging some of your own personal belief systems. You may start to go to bat with your belief system, and it may bring you into conflict with some of either your siblings or your neighbors or your local community. So watch out for that challenge. And Jupiter is going to allow you to work hard. Like, 6th house is a house that requires you to kind of suck it up and get it done, and not do it without expectations, I guess, is the thing. The journey is more important than the end goal, I think, with 6th house stuff. But Jupiter is moving out of your 5th and into your 6th. That's the ruler of your ascendant too. And it was aspecting your ascendant by trine, and now it's in aversion to your ascendant. So again, have some extra compassion for your Sagittarius rising friends out there, because they're probably going to be feeling the weight of losing that support from Jupiter, witnessing the ascendant. But again, this too shall pass. It's temporary. Okay, let's keep rolling. Heading around the bend. Capricorn rising. I know that's what you've all been waiting for. Like, half my audience is Capricorn rising. So Cap rising. Okay. Don says, get it done. Thank you. We're not super duper at the moment. Oh, you Sag rising, Don. Yeah. It's going to be just a lot of hard work, Don. It's okay. You know, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose, right? And oftentimes, sometimes having restrictions in your life can actually lead to a greater sense of freedom. Freedom is not necessarily not having any responsibilities. And that's what I think this new moon and Jupiter moving into 6 is going to be teaching you, is that you can be responsible and feel free through your mind, not necessarily, even if you're feeling restricted through your circumstances. All right. So Cap rising, this is going to happen in your 5th house. So a new start to your creative endeavors, reevaluating your creative process, reevaluating maybe how you seek pleasure and entertainment. Maybe this is the moment where you're like, you know what, I've been eating a little too much of this food that isn't healthy, or participating in recreational activities that are maybe not as healthy as I would like, and maybe you have to reevaluate and change that system potentially. Mars is going to be moving out of your 7th house, so your relationships may start to improve. Venus is going to take over and provide resources. You can lean on your partner for support at this point, but there will be some tension around your shared resources and the property that you own with other people, maybe having an effect on your own financial picture. You know, Cap rising, they've been seeing Saturn going through the 3rd house, and it's really important to like get real about the narratives you tell yourself around your daily habits, your daily routines, how you deal with neighbors, how you deal with siblings. Could be all of those things are being challenged with the Saturn in the 3rd house. All right. And yeah, you've been maybe backtracking and reevaluating 5th house matters. This could also be related to a child. You know, if you have children or if you have a young person in your life, they may need your help as far as like helping them through some challenging circumstances potentially. Ooh, Don. Don says we just spent $10,000 on home repairs. He's not happy. Oh boy, Don. Well, good luck with that. I hope that you had a good conversation about it beforehand. Yeah, I mean, that's Saturn in your 4th house, right? That's like getting real about the cost of things and things of that nature, you know? So, and you had Mars in your 8th house, creating some challenges with shared resources, but hopefully that's a little bit, you know, coming to a close, and Venus is going to help smooth that out a little bit. Ooh, Michelle said they just paid my son's car off with Capricorn rising, right? Yeah, so you are helping out a child in that regard. My partner has been recently helping out my daughter as she's transitioned into a new residence at her college. Like, we've been cooking for her for a week or two here, while she transitions into a space that has a bigger kitchen, things like that, because they shut down the cafeteria. I don't know why. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, but they shut it down like early while there's still kids on campus before their summer housing opens up. So another way of supporting a child type of thing. Dawn says the bidet broke and flooded the house. That's actually, it's horrifying, but also hilarious. And especially since your 4th house is Pisces, like Saturn, something going wrong in a water sign and flooding the house. It's funny. I'm sorry that happened, and that sounds expensive and horrifying, but give yourself and your husband a laugh and go look up the Saturday Night Live skit with Kristen Wiig and Zach Galifianakis about bidets with Andy Samberg, and you'll just have a laugh over that. The bidet is the bidet. just say bidet like 1,000 times. It's pretty funny. Aquarius rising. Aquarius rising is another fixed rising sign. So another one where you feel it pretty intensely. Aquarius rising has the new moon in Taurus in the 4th house. A new start where you're reevaluating your systems in your home, where you are trying to figure out what is going right and what might be potentially going wrong in the home environment. And Dawn, after you check that out, just leave me a comment after the fact and let me know how you experienced that SNL skit. I need feedback. I think it's pretty funny. So with your fourth house new moon Aquarius rising, you've got Pluto just retrograding in your first house right now. A lot of changes in how you see yourself within your community. A lot of things that may have been neglected within the self that need to be, transformed. Mars is going to move out of your sixth house, so maybe there was some challenges with your health or with an injury or an illness, inflammation, maybe even a conflict with like a contractor. Okay, this is something that I see a lot with sixth house placements, is when you have Mars in the sixth, sometimes there's a disagreement with someone that you've contracted for work. So this could be finally some of those things getting resolved. Like I'm imagining Aquarius rising doing a renovation in their house, and they're finally at this new moon saying, oh, the contractor finally is getting, we're figuring this thing out. We've got to reevaluate if we want to work with this person, or we got to change the budget, or this worked and this didn't. Renovations always kind of, they always get more expensive than you originally thought. So Remco just linked to the bidet skit. So thank you, Remco. You're going above and beyond today, Fred. That's amazing. You were awesome. So when Mars moves into the seventh house, there could be some challenges with your partner, and your perspective on things. And you'll rely on the things that connect you as a family, as a shared sense of roots with Jupiter in the fourth, right? Like maybe you're trying to expand something, see how you can take actions to plan something together rather than getting into conflict about who does what, whose perspective is right. Think about the things that unite you, just like we talked about today. All right. Last but not least, you long-suffering Pisces risings are having a new moon in the third house. Now, this may be a start to a new daily habit, a new routine. You may be reevaluating the way that you move through your day, what you eat, what you do, your schedule. All of those things could be up for reevaluation right now. You may have been experiencing some challenges with either children or a creative process, or dealing with some challenges around how you seek pleasure in your life. And now Mars is going to move out of that house and into the sixth, probably creating some tension around how hard you're working, and maybe having some difficulty getting some rest. Just be careful with Mars in the sixth house that you don't allow yourself overestimating your abilities lead to an injury or an illness. You got Saturn in the first, so recognize your limitations, Pisces rising, whether it's spiritually or otherwise, or especially with your body though. Oftentimes the will and the spirit can exceed the physical capabilities. I know I've been guilty of this even as a Leo rising, and that can lead to some challenges. But rely on your ability to ritualize your life consistently, patiently, to be able to get you through some of the challenging work that you're doing on creating a new sense of self. And Mars moving out of your fifth house. So if there was a conflict with your kids, or with your challenging, if you've been going through like any substance challenges or anything like that, which sometimes happens with Pisces placements, Venus will start to smooth that over with the fifth house. Okay, I think we made it through all of the rising signs. So friends, let's start rounding the bend here, and we'll do a couple more things, and then we'll call it a day. And thanks again for all of these awesome comments in the chat today. We're going to do the hexagram and the animal, and then we will go about our weekend. So the hexagram I got for you was hexagram number 4. 4 is interesting because 4 translates to youthful ignorance. It is excuse me. Sorry, I'm trying to do too many things at once. It is a hexagram related to inexperience, maybe immaturity, maybe, the mistakes that we make because we don't know any better, right? Which is really what has tied in with a lot of the things that we've been talking about with the Decan of Taurus III. Like oftentimes the mistakes that we make are just because we just never done it before. And we couldn't have anticipated the challenges that came up. There was a force that was greater than us that we needed to have some humility to learn from. And there are two changing lines with this hexagram, number 4. Line number 1 says, at the beginning of inexperience, it is beneficial to use discipline, but remove shackles and fetters. Going on this way brings humility. Or humiliation. Sorry, it brings humiliation. So this is speaking to the remedies, I think, that we may try to impose on situations that have fallen into disrepair potentially. I think it's important to be careful not to be too rigid about making a change. And oftentimes when we get frustrated with a situation, we try to go whole hog in the other direction. If someone has like had some sort of indiscretion with us, we set these rules for them. We say, you did this, and now I have to have this other, equally powerful reaction. And I think that oftentimes what that does is create even more resistance in the situation that you're experiencing. So find the right balance, especially when it comes to correcting your mistakes. Oftentimes the challenges that came up, the corruption that you're experiencing, took a long time to get to that point. And that means that sometimes it'll take some time to unravel. This is a Saturn decan. It requires patience and endurance. It requires showing up day after day, weeding the garden, becoming clear about expectations, about boundaries, about how you're going to remedy the situation. It takes faith in the process. You may not see those changes overnight, especially with that T-square and fixed signs. There may be some time that needs to pass. And keep in mind too that there's a Venus retrograde coming up in July in Leo. So we may have to reevaluate some of these things moving forward as well. Line number 5 says, childlike innocence brings good fortune. I love that line. So that really means just keep things simple. Be open-minded, be willing to learn. Oftentimes when a child falls down and they're learning to walk, yeah, they cry for a minute. They get their feelings and their frustration out about it, but then they get right back up and they start doing it again because that's just part of how you learn, right? Same thing with our experiences here. And thank you, Remco. Sorry, and Remco's got to go. Thank you so much for your moderating abilities, Remco, and for sharing the bidet SNL skit. You're awesome. Oftentimes when we fall down and make a mistake due to our inexperience, are we going to berate ourselves for it? Are we going to berate a toddler for falling down when they're trying to take their first steps? No, I don't think we are. We have compassion for that innocence. We have compassion for that process, right? If we're good parents, right? And there's some bad parents out there that are real dicks to their toddler if they fall down, but we don't want to be like that. We want to have compassion and we want to nurture something to its fruition, like Venus in the second decan of Cancer. We want to create a safe space, a safe environment to be able to grow something to maturity. So being open-minded, be willing to learn, be willing to make mistakes, to feel our feelings, not repress them, to have a good cry every once in a while, but then to get back up and start walking again. And eventually we're running. I saw a great example of this. I love this video. There's a video of a small toddler who was taking his first steps, and unexpectedly, Blinding Lights by The Weeknd comes on in the background, and the kid is walking and he starts to smile, he starts to dance instead of walking, and everyone just loses their mind because it was so adorable. So he's like walking and dancing, and he's like, yeah, and he's just doing his thing. So maybe we need to be like that small child. We need to dance a little bit. We're a little nervous about taking the first steps. Maybe we're falling down, but eventually we start to get it and we're like, oh yeah, okay, I got this, right? And we're feeling the rhythm, we're adjusting to the circumstances, to the vibe, to the mood, and we're keeping our positivity around it. We're keeping our positive intentions and keeping our eyes on the prize, eyes on the goal. So this is changing to hexagram number 62, which is translates to inner truth, sincerity, trustworthiness, conformity between the inside and the outside. Again, this might be a challenge of feeling, how do we express ourselves most authentically? This is part of the problem. I guess I don't know if it's a problem, but it might be part of the discussion and tension that comes up when Mars moves into Leo, is who are we? Like, how are we going to, we want to assert ourselves. We want to say, this is who I am, damn it. And I'm not that. That's corrupt. And we may have to do that, but in a gentler way. We may have to Jupiter in the overcoming square with it. But ultimately, I think the real lesson of Leo and inner truth and sincerity, which I think are connected sometimes to Leo. And I've talked about this with clients, and I've done a lot of exploration with this being my ascendant. When we are truly confident and truly secure in who we are, we don't have to announce it to the world all the time. We just go about our business. We don't have to insist that other people follow us. We don't have to put on some kind of protocol like face. We don't have to put on a mask. And I think that when we start to connect with our inner essence and just feel comfortable with it, then you have the attitude of like, here's who I am. Isn't that great? And you can be you, and that's great too. And if you don't vibe with what I'm doing and you want to go in this direction, that's cool. We'll see you later, you know? Rather than getting all huffed up and puffed up and prideful and defensive. I think that's part of that conformity by the inside, between the inside and the outside, is how can you kind of, find that balance so that you're not trying to be something that you're not, and also, allowing other people to love who you are, right? If you don't show people who you really are, you're robbing people of the opportunity to actually appreciate you as well. So consider that. The animal that I have for this week is the dragonfly, which I thought was interesting. The dragonfly is this beautiful iridescent insect that goes through lots of changes, and it goes through lots of stages of life, from like a little nymph to the adult stage, pupa stage, all of those stages. And once they've reached that final form, there's a beautiful iridescent creature. So they talk about, and they're very lightweight. They just land and float through the air. So the dragonfly as a symbol can talk about lightness of being, like maybe not taking things so seriously, maybe not being so intense about it. The fixed signs can get intense. There's an intensity, there's a concentration of energy. Having a little bit of lightheartedness around it, a little bit of celebratory energy. Venus in the 3 of Cups decan, right? Cancer 2. Celebrate your accomplishments. Celebrate what brings you together rather than focusing on what tears you apart. Shining your light in your colors, right? Seeing the good in people and in situations can be a great way to alleviate tension. Looking past illusion is another dragonfly energy, to see towards essence. But also on the flip side, sometimes how do we use illusion to create good impressions sometimes too? Like, we have to be careful that we're not being dishonest, but there can be like magic in figuring out what face you want to present to the world, and that could be part of this also. So that is what I have for you today, my friends. It's so nice to be able to join you once again. Thanks for having patience with my week off and my gardening expeditions. I hope that you're having a great Taurus season, that eclipse season was transformative for you and you survived okay. And we'll get through this period intact, I hope, as well. Just remember to be flexible, remember to be adaptable, try not to get too fixed in any one position, and we'll be all right. All right, my friends, that's what I've got for you today. I appreciate all of you out there. And I will see you the next time. I'll probably see you next week for the astrology of June already. So see you at the end of next week for the astrology of June. Do me a huge favor. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, sign up for the newsletter. And yeah, I'll see you the next time, friends. Remember, be kind to one another. Be kind to yourself, and that'll be easier for you to put kindness out into the world, right? Okay, that's what I've got. And we'll see you the next time. Peace.